Good afternoon. This is the second meeting of the 25th Council, and the meeting will come to order. All councilors are present via Zoom, and this is our first regular meeting of the year, and so I wanted to welcome Councilors Feeble-Corn and Grout and Sanchez, and yeah, I guess those are the new the new councilors. And I think all councilors are present, correct? Yes, thank you. So we will start with a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance in English. And if Councilor Pena, you'd be willing to do it in Spanish, that'd be great. And I'll read it in English or state it. Start with a moment of silence. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. President. Juro fidelidad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y la república que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos.
All right, muchas gracias, Concejal Peña. As was noted in a press conference from our office Friday, posted on our website and noted in published agenda, this meeting has special procedures and is being held via Zoom video conference. Members of the public, city staff, and media have the ability to view this meeting live through 4 different platforms: GovTV on Comcast, Channel 16, the GovTV website, YouTube, and Zoom webinar. These live streams can also be accessed from most smartphones, tablets, and computers. Also, this meeting is closed captioned, and you may enable the closed captioning services on your television or device at this time. For those watching the live stream, thank you for joining us. The video recording of this and all past council meetings will also remain available for viewing at any time on the City Council's website. Council staff is available via telephone. If members of the public need assistance finding videos online, please call 505-768-3100 for assistance during business hours, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Council is accepting live public comment today, as well as any written comments. Written comments received by 1 p.m. were distributed to the councilors in advance of this meeting. And our next order of business is Proclamations and Presentations. And Councilor Grout is sponsoring a proclamation. Councilor Grout.
Thank you, Mr. President. Whereas human trafficking involves the exploitation of people for some type of labor or commercial sex act through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. And whereas every year millions of men, women, and children are trafficked worldwide, creating an illegal industry that generates more than $150 billion, according to the International Labor Organization, more than Netflix, Disney, Starbucks, and Coca-Cola combined. And whereas the U.S. Department of Justice estimates that 14,500 to 17,500 foreign nationals are trafficked into the United States every year. And an estimated 200,000 American children are at risk for trafficking into the sex industry. And whereas homeless children are among the most vulnerable and targeted by traffickers, there are approximately 5,000 homeless youth that travel through Albuquerque per year. And 1/5 of the homeless children are trafficked for sex. And whereas the state of New Mexico has limited specialized services for young sex trafficking survivors, and the New Mexico Dream Center exists to fill gaps in services for homeless and trafficked youth, and to restore the dreams and hopeless, helpless, hurting, and broken children. And whereas the council, the governing body of the city of Albuquerque, believes that survivors of sex trafficking have a life's purpose and that their hope for the future can be restored. Be it proclaimed that the council, the governing body of the city of Albuquerque, hereby recognizes January 2022 as Slavery and Human Trafficking Month, and commends the New Mexico Dream Center for its work in restoring the broken dreams of trafficked youth and transforming sadness and hopelessness to peace and joy. And I'd like to commend Shelley Rep, the executive director of New Mexico Dream Centers, for the work that she does in our community.
Thank you, Councilor Grau. And is Shelley on the call, Nate? Julian? Oh, okay. Well, thank you for that important proclamation, Councilor Grau. Next order of business is economic development discussion, and we have none scheduled at this meeting. We'll move on to general public comments. Hello to those joining us to provide live public comment. We also received written comments that were distributed in advance of the meeting. Members of the public are able to address the council if they've signed up for live public comment per the instructions published in the agenda and on our website Friday. Speakers will be moved into the meeting room 2 at a time. They will remain muted with their camera off until they're called upon to speak, at which point they can turn on their camera, unmute themselves, and will have 1.5 minutes to provide comments to the council. After that, they will again be muted and returned as an attendee of the Zoom webinar. Comments are to be addressed to the councilors only through the council president. Any disruptive comment will result in removal from the Zoom webinar. Mr. Moya, please call the name of the first speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our first speaker is Teresa Constantinides. Excuse me if I mispronounce your last name. Teresa, you have 1.5 minutes to speak. Once you begin speaking, the timer will start.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the council. I just am here to speak in favor of the South Campus Tax Incremental Development District item that will be coming up as item number 14D. We're very excited about this partnership with the city of Albuquerque, and we are hoping for your support. We're happy to answer any questions when that item comes up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. President, we had 4 other individuals sign up to speak, but I'm not seeing any of the other ones as an attendee of the meeting at this time.
All right, thanks. And were people signed up for any specific items as well? Thought I saw, but none of them are in the meeting yet. Okay.
Mr. President, yes, I know one is the CPOA board member, so we can go back to them once that item is heard if you'd like.
Okay, that sounds great. Very good. Thanks. We do have next on the agenda, administration question and answer period. And there's a question from Councilor Jones about Albuquerque Fire Rescue and Human Resources.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. And I think this question would be best answered by AFR Chief Gallegos, if he's available. Good evening.
President Benton, Councilor Jones, yes, ma'am.
Okay, just a question in some of our minds, most especially mine, unfortunately, is the AFR, the members have worked really hard over the recent years to raise the standards for promotion to different ranks within the Albuquerque Fire Rescue. However, it's my understanding that now some of the standards for promotion to deputy fire chief were waived for a short period of time. Can you tell me, please, explain why those standards were waived when so many officers have been working hard to achieve those standards, which were set for them by the department? Chief.
Council President Benton, Councilor Jones, thank you for your time. And yes, we do currently have a deputy chief selection process in place for whenever the process began. I had 5 vacancies of my 6 deputy chief positions. So again, 5 vacancies for the 6 deputy chief positions. And we thought that due to the amount of vacancies and the initial amount of people that applied, we thought it best to open up the process a little bit further so that we can get, again, as many qualified applicants as possible. So again, we working with city HR, followed a process, and again, temporarily waiving certain qualifications for the deputy chief position, which again, there was intentional misleading information. But then at the end of the day, the entire process that we put in place, that we work towards, and that we are currently holding works. We actually got more qualified applicants than we did before that fall within Section 200 of city rules and regulations. So again, the process that's to open it up to a wider pool, not only got more applicants, but we even got more qualified applicants that fell within Section 200, which again was the main point, to get more qualified applicants so that I can again build, or we can build our team to support the citizens of Albuquerque, public safety, and to get that team in place, again, the best team in place, so that we can move forward. And again, I want my staff or my team to, again, to build a great staff for you.
Thank you. And Mr. President, if I may, one more question. Chief, can you tell me that you were looking at increasing the pool? How many initially applied for these positions?
So again, for the 5 vacant positions, we had 12 apply, but only 10 of them qualified. And then after we changed the pool, we had 22 apply, and 15 of them had bachelors and 13 of them qualified underneath the Section 200.
And Chief, it's hard for me to understand. If you had 10 applicants for 5 positions, I'm not sure why that wasn't enough from which to choose someone for the 5 people for this position, if they all met the qualifications.
Yes, ma'am, Councilor Jones, and I understand that, but again, we are living in, again, a COVID world right now. So the world has been flipped on its head. We wanted to make sure that, again, we're giving everybody the opportunity to, again, just in case life happens, that they were able to, again, show the interest of becoming a deputy chief. But at the end of the day, again, the process works because we even got more applicants that fall within Section 200 than we did initially. So again, that was my goal, is to again encourage as many qualified applicants to apply for the process as possible. And again, we did get an increased number of Section 200 applicants that applied.
And if I may, Chief, please, Mr. President, if you would indulge me, thank you. Chief, so how many total applicants did you get before you started the process to select someone?
Council President Benton, Councilor Jones, so right now we got 22 applicants.
And of those, Chief, how many have the qualifications that were originally required?
13, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. And I would like to ask some questions. Thank you, Chief. That was very helpful. And I would like to ask some questions, please. I think the person to answer these questions, Mr. President, is Anthony Romero, because it's kind of an HR issue. And I believe Mr. Romero was asked to be here this evening. Good evening, Mr.
Hello.
Romero.
Good evening.
Hi, thank you. Sorry, I didn't want to catch the chief on something that was not what he normally does. So here you are. So in order to issue the temporary waiver on some of the eligibility requirements for promotion to deputy chief, what policy or policies and or procedures were followed?
So what
And if I may, let me ask one more thing. I understand that HR issued the actual memo on this on what would be required. Is that correct?
Council President Benton, Councilor Jones. So what happened was we had Chief and I had a discussion about wanting to expand the pool. and he asked me if I would support him in a request to the CAO to make an exception request for this to Section 200 to expand the pool so that we would ensure that there would be enough interested applicants to apply for those 5 deputy chief vacancies out of the 6. And so when I was presented the request from the chief, I concurred with him, and that was submitted to the CAO for approval. And so it was a temporary request to the rules for these unclassified positions that would not be a part of a collective bargaining unit.
Okay, and then if I may, Mr. President, just wave your hands if you want me to stop this.
Please.
They all are tied
You have the
together.
floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. So how many of the people who applied had the requisite bachelor's degree?
Council President Benton, Councilor Jones, Chief Gallegos, I believe there were 10 folks that had initially applied that were eligible for those 5 vacant positions.
Who had the bachelor's degree? They had taken the time and gotten their bachelor's degree.
I believe not all of those 10, right, Chief, had the bachelor's. I don't.
Council Presidents Ben, Councilor Jones, yeah. So initially it was 12 applied, only 10 qualified, and then the second round was 22 applied. 15 of them have bachelors, and 13 of them had everything that was necessary for the Section 200.
And I know this is just a guess again, and there are other counselors want to ask questions, but why do you think there was a change of heart in the people who had not applied the first time around? What happened?
Council President Ben, Councilor Jones, I couldn't tell you that. I am just grateful that all of them applied. I know I did have a few of them. I talked to a few of them that's actually met the qualifications afterwards, and I was like, how come you didn't apply? And again, some of them were just hesitant because they just didn't lack of confidence, and some of them just again were like, well, we just thought about it for the future, but the future is now. And again, that's where one of the biggest things that I've again conveyed to most of my members is don't pass up opportunities, especially if you're fully qualified. Don't pass up those opportunities. They're amazing opportunities that could benefit you in the future, that can benefit your family, benefits again the department because of their wealth of knowledge. And again, that's where more of the qualified applicants actually applied the second go arounds, and this is where we're at now. So again, I am grateful that more of them applied the second go around.
Okay, Mr. President, if you'll indulge me, and then I'll yield with reserving the right to come back if I think of something else.
Of course.
So, Chief, so if you hire someone without a bachelor's, are they now going to have to achieve that bachelor's degree with X amount of time? Will that be a consideration of their job to maintain that position?
I'm sorry, Council President Ben, Councilor Jones. In my opinion, absolutely. I think that we need to lead by example and continue down the path of excellence. And if that were to occur, then yes, that would be one of my expectations for them.
I'm not sure that I understand what you're saying. So you're the chief, and that would be your recommendation. So does that mean that would be a rule for future hirings for these positions?
Council President Ben, Councilor Jones. So right now, again, that's where it's just a temporary waiver, right? So we want to make sure that these are already in place, and due to life in today's world, which has flipped on its head, again, we still believe in these rules, but we also think that's, life happens. So we want to make sure that because of over the last 2 years, again, everything is flipped on its head, and we still want, to move forward in progressing our departments. So again, this is why where it's a temporary waiver.
Okay, one more, and then I promise I'll yield. So how many vacancies do you have in this area in the department now?
The proclamation.
Council President Benton, Councilor Jones, currently we did out of that pool, we did promote one. That was the pool of, or I have 5 vacancies.
You want to go back?
And I promoted 1, so I still have 4 vacancies in the deputy chief out of 6.
Thank you. I might come back again, Chief. Thank you.
All right, we have hands raised from Councilor Davis, then Councilor Sanchez, and then the budget conference room. Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Councilor Jones, I appreciate you bringing this up, Chief. Thanks for being here. I've been a big supporter of AFR, a big supporter of yours, and I'm excited to see you take this position, especially given all your time and service in our parts of Southeast. And thank you for that. But I want to follow up to Councilor Jones very briefly, because it concerns me a little bit, honestly. What I heard, and perhaps I'm wrong, but Chief, clarify for me. Originally, you had 10 qualified applicants for 5 positions before the standards were changed, or you anticipated 10. Is that correct?
Councilor President Ben, Councilor Davis. So originally we had, again, I had 5 vacancies out of my 6 deputy chiefs. And then originally I had 10 qualified applicants apply. And so then we were looking for, again, a bigger pool.
But Mr. President and Chief, thank you. What I understand is you had more qualified applicants than you had positions. And so it concerns me that we changed the rules after the fact, right? And here's why. Let me say this. I appreciate Councilor Jones, and so I think it would behoove us not to delay this meeting here, but certainly some follow-ups in anticipation of maybe the first Public Safety Committee meeting or this council's meeting next. It seems to me that some things I heard that I'd love to hear some more from you and Mr. Romero and the CAO about are that if we anticipated that these openings were occurring and that you anticipated that the pool would not work or that there were other qualified applicants, I'm not sure why the department didn't engage in recruiting and encouraging those qualified applicants before it posted the position. And it seems to me, as you said, you were able to find some additional folks down in the ranks or who might be eligible who didn't think they might qualify or weren't encouraged. And that speaks to me about a recruiting and a personnel management concern or maybe just a strategy that we got to revisit. But I also wanted to ask Mr. Romero or you perhaps, Chief, if you know, and otherwise Mr. President, I'll defer this back to public safety or our next meeting. But if we have a position where a director wants to change qualifications, I am under the impression that there is a process where they can submit that request through HR and the CAO to make those recommendations, to review those recommendations and requirements through a process that involves HR, the department, et cetera, instead of temporarily changing them. Is that correct, Chief, or Mr. Romero?
Councilor President Benton and Councilor Davis, on the first part, as far as recruitment, I will take full responsibility for that. One of the things that I encourage all my members to take every opportunity, again, telling you the numbers is I have 16 battalion chiefs. Out of those 16 battalion chiefs, 11 of them were qualified. And then on top of that, there was out of the 56 captains, we had another 24 of them that were qualified for the deputy chief position. And again, that was I'll take complete responsibility for that. I didn't recruit and continue to tell all of them, hey, I think that you guys need to apply. Let's see, I believe in you. And that's where the second go around, there's a few of them that, again, I did ask, hey, you are completely qualified. You need to believe in yourself, have confidence in your abilities. And I'm not saying that I'm going to select you, but I also don't want you to doubt yourself. I want you to believe that you can do this job. And so that there's some of them that did apply, and there's some of them that still did not apply because they thought that they still needed a couple more years to mature, which is perfectly fine. I respect that. So, but yes.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. President, could we let Mr. Romero answer my second question about, I believe there is a process through which we can change requirements instead of temporarily suspending requirements for a single process. Mr. President and Mr. Romero, is that correct?
Council President Benton, Councilor Davis. So with this particular instance, this is involving an unclassified position where we were able to make this to go pretty quickly, so that we weren't being disruptive of the whole process, right? So it was an unclassified position. There were no collective bargaining agreements that we needed to abide by. So this was the quickest way to deal with the chief's concern to expand the pool. For other positions in the city that are classified, there is a whole different process for that.
Thank you, Mr. Romero. Mr. President, my last question, and I'll say this and close with the thing. Mr. Romero, can you tell me, is it normal practice for the administration to suspend the rules when they have twice as many applicants for a position as there are qualified applicants as there are positions to fill?
Council President Benton, Councilor Davis, this was the first time since I began this role in March that I've entered into this process or agreed that it was appropriate. One of the reasons that I do still believe that this was a proper and appropriate action to take, even though there was 10 people that were eligible to the 5, right now there's a lot of folks that are going into an interview process, and even after they're selected, they've declined, or before they go into the interview, they withdraw. And so we've sort of seen that that process happen over and over again. So I thought it was just very good practice to go ahead and expand that pool as much so that we wouldn't get in a point where we thought, oh, we don't have enough bodies to fill these vacancies.
Thank you, Mr. Romero. Mr. President, thank you for the time. I know other councilors have some things on this topic as well.
Yes,
and thanks to Councilor Jones for bringing this up and bringing this to our attention. I think it's important. Mr. President, it just occurs to me that I think it's important that when the city sets personnel rules, we follow them and that we make that process predictable, helping our employees sort of set their personnel goals and their career path goals, making them attainable. And I think, when we take sort of these rash considerations, it undermines our employee confidence in that process. And so it's my hope, although counselors are not allowed to participate directly in hiring, it's my hope that the administration would revisit this process, maybe set this extraordinary process aside and revisit this. But I look forward to hearing more in the Public Safety Committee if we haven't had a resolution by then. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilor Sanchez.
Mr. President, I have a question in reference to directed to Chief Gallegos too. As you know, I come from a law enforcement background, which is real similar to what goes on at AFR. And my biggest concern, and most of those concerns were addressed by Councilor Davis in reference to it being after the fact, which sends wrong messages to the rank and file, and also whether it's a normal process. And so those two things were really sitting on me. And I know from being in an area such as, we're public safety, that it makes a massive concern through the rank and file when after the fact, the process has changed. And it means that there's so many officers and so many firefighters that are looking up to move up. And now there's a possibility that these individuals could be coming from outside the department. It could actually cause problems with upward movement, those kinds of things as well. So I just have concerns about it as well. Pretty much all the same concerns that Councilor Davis brought up. But I know I've been in that situation and I've had these kinds of things happen to me as being the next in line for that promotion, or actually not having to compete against others who actually were qualified, and now you open up a pool to many more people. So that gives me a lot of concern when something like that happens, especially changing after the fact.
Thank you, Councilor. take it back to, I did see budget conference room. I don't see their hand up right now, but I'll take it back to Councilor Jones if she wants to conclude.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, I think that was some good discussion. I'm still not absolutely confident that we have all the answers that we would like. Oh, I see Councilor Lewis still wants to speak. Would you like to have him speak?
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. Yeah, we just had those two hands go up. So I think Councilor Bassan and then Councilor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Have the positions now been filled? Have interviews been completed and have the positions been filled?
Council President Benton, Councilor Bassan, we are in the process right now.
Okay.
So they have not been filled.
Okay, I guess I just would like to make sure to echo the fact that when I hear 10 qualified applicants, qualified to me means exactly what we're looking for and meets all the requirements. So to have double that, it doesn't seem to make sense to me either. And I don't see, and I'm willing to be persuaded, I guess, if I don't see how COVID affects that either. If it's double the amount of what we're looking for and they're all meeting the requirements, to me, it just seems a little, I agree, something doesn't seem right. So I'm not sure what it is, but I really want us to make sure to fill the positions fairly and following the right process.
Thank you. Councilor Lewis.
Mr. President, my question was unrelated, so I don't know if you want to continue on this topic and catch me at the end.
Sure. Thank you, Councilor. So I guess, there's some discussion there. I think maybe just some possibly referral to public safety as a further discussion. The committees are very good for that quick give and take. But I'll leave that to those who have spoken about the issue. And we'll move on, I think, at this point to Councilor Lewis's question.
Mr. President, I meant to stop you at item 4, but I think it applies to the Q&A for the administration. But I'm just wondering if we have used that regularly, if we've used the economic development discussion item, if that's been a regular part of our council meeting, if it's just on the agenda. I think I put that on the agenda when I was council president 6 years ago. And so if it's something that we're using regularly, I would really encourage the administration to take advantage of that. I think the original intent was that we just keep economic drivers at the forefront, and that the council to have that discussion and the administration to bring those opportunities to the council on a regular basis so that we could support those initiatives. And so I guess just a question if it's something we're using regularly. If not, let's get it off the agenda, or let's I really want to encourage the administration to take advantage of that item.
Thank you, Councilor. And I kind of always appreciated it being on there. I think I've brought up a couple over the years since then, on my own. And of course, councilors are welcome to do that as well, as is the administration. But I'll just put it out there to the councilors, if do a straw poll and let me know what you're thinking about whether this should stay on. We can always change a minor rules change, right, Chris? If we were to remove it, but I like the idea that it's on there personally, and it seems, in response to how often it's been used recently, I can't recall, but I know that, certainly in the last quarter of last year, I think there might have been one. And so occasionally, I guess, is the answer from my recollection anyway.
Well, thanks, Mr. President. And I would definitely, encourage the department, to see it as an opportunity to be able to bring, items to us that they're working on, and, for the kind of support that we may be able to provide that they may not be able to see if it weren't for this kind of discussion. And so if they're willing to initiate that, maybe give us a list of items that they'd like to discuss with us in that item in these meetings in the next few months, and I would love to work with them on that as well.
Sounds good. Thank you, Councilor. We do have a couple of the folks who got in who had signed up to speak, so I'm going to interrupt the agenda here and move back to that for just a moment before we go to the approval of the journal, unless there are any other questions from counselors. We'll keep it open. Any other questions, Q&A? Seeing none. Julian?
Thank you, Mr. President. We'll go to Fred Mondragon. If you can accept the promotion to panelist to provide your public comment, and Kelly Ward as well, if you can accept the promotion to panelist for public comment. Oh, and there's Paula Getz too. Okay, we'll go with Paula first. Please go, feel free to unmute yourself, and your time will begin when you start speaking.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Council President Benton and councilors, for allowing me to speak today in support of R221, the approving the age-friendly action plan. I'm Paula Getz, and I'm a co-founder of New Mexico New, and that stands for New Elder World. We're a nonprofit that we're proactively engaging newly retired or about to retire 50 to 70-year-olds in Albuquerque and make it easy for them to wrap their skills and experience around nonprofits, small businesses, and startups. This engagement can be both an economic force and also combat the loneliness and isolation that can happen if we don't proactively reach out to our older adults. So New Mexico New really believes this resolution will be essential to this kind of support for our Albuquerque older adults. And as we all grow in that population, which we know is going to be about 40%, we know we offer tremendous value, and that we understand that if we engage us, our city can grow smarter, keep our older adults healthier, and utilize us to help all generations in the community. So thank you for your consideration and support. We know that we're a tremendous asset in our community. We still have a lot to contribute. So help us do that by passing this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula.
Our next speaker is Kelly Ward.
Good
Your time will
afternoon.
begin once you start speaking.
You got it. Good afternoon, counselors. My apologies for not being on the Zoom earlier. I'm here to speak to the agenda item that is the South Campus Tax Increment Development District. My name is Kelly Ward. I'm the Business Development Director for Lobo Development Corporation, and we will have some prime responsibility for the implementation of the infrastructure plan regarding or in the increment district. So I will yield the remainder of my time and come back to you for that agenda item. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mr. Ward.
And our last speaker will be Fred Mondragon. Fred, please feel free to turn your video on, unmute yourself, and your time will begin when you start speaking.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. I don't know about my picture. That doesn't matter. So I would also like to speak to the item number 14D regarding the master development agreement for the University of New Mexico. If I can be allowed to speak at that time, I'd appreciate it, Mr. President and members of the council.
Certainly, Fred. I think we can do that. Have you and Mr. Ward brought back into the room when we have that agenda item. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that, Mr. President.
All right, thank you. We move on now to the approval of the journal. Vice President Lewis.
Mr. President, I move approval of the December 20th journal.
And is there a second? I see a couple of seconds from Councilor Bassan. And there's a motion and a second. Ms. Ortega, call the vote.
Councilor Bassan.
Yes.
Councilor Davis.
Yes.
Councilor Feeblecorn.
Yes.
Councilor Grout.
Yes.
Councilor
Yes.
Jones. Councilor Jones.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilor Lewis.
Yes.
Councilor Pena.
Yes.
Councilor Sanchez.
Yes.
Councilor Benton.
Yes,
9-0.
thank you. And Councilor Lewis, the January 10th journal.
I move approval of the January 10th journal.
And there's a second from Councilor Grout. Ms. Ortega.
Councilor Bassan.
Yes.
Councilor Davis.
Yes.
Counselor Feeblecorn,
Yes.
Counselor Grout,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
9-0.
Shows I'm unmuted. You good? Okay. All right. Are there any changes to the letter of introduction? I move that the rules be suspended for the purpose of placing R4 on today's agenda for action. R4 is adopting the multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan for the city of Albuquerque and Bernalillo County. And we need a vote of 2/3 of councilors present to suspend the rules. Is there a second? There's a second from Councilor Davis and Ms. Ortega.
Counselor Hassan,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Feeblecorn,
Yes.
Counselor Grout,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you. I move the rules be suspended for the purpose of introducing R5 and placing it on the February 7th council agenda for action. R5 is approving and authorizing the filing of a grant application for the Healthy Environment Living Program grant with the United States EPA and providing an appropriation to the Environmental Health Department in fiscal years 2022 and 2023. See a second from Councilor Bassan. Thank you.
Counselor Hassan,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
thank you. Counselor Feeblecorn,
Yes.
Counselor Grout,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you. I move the rules be suspended for the purpose of introducing O4 and placing it on the February 7th council agenda for action. O4 is approving a project involving Agenda LLC pursuant to the Local Economic Development Act and City Ordinance to support acquisition, construction, renovation, and improvement of a facility for a public relations service company located in Albuquerque, authorizing the execution of a project participation agreement and other documents in connection with the project. Again, this is a suspension of the rules requiring 2/3 of councilors. And
Second.
from Council Vice President Lewis, thank you. And Mr. Ortega.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Feeblecorn,
Yes.
Counselor Grout,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes,
9-0.
thank you. I'll move the rules be suspended for the purpose of introducing O5 and placing it on February 7th council agenda. O5 is authorizing the issuance of and sale of City of Albuquerque taxable industrial revenue bonds, Series 2022 and 2 series, and a maximum aggregate principal amount of $5 million designated as one City of Albuquerque taxable industrial revenue bonds for Heritage Defender Project Series 2022A and 2, the City of Albuquerque taxable industrial revenue bonds for Agenda LLC Project Series 2022B. And there's a second from Councilor Lewis. Thanks. And Ms. Ortega, call the vote.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Feeblecorn,
Yes.
Counselor Grout,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes,
9-0.
thank you. I move the rules be suspended for the purpose of introducing O6 and placing it on the February 7th council agenda for action. O6 is approving a project involving Heritage Defender LLC pursuant to the Local Economic Development Act and City Ordinance to support the acquisition, construction, and improvement of an automotive fabrication, light manufacturing, and restoration facility for Heritage Defender LLC located in Albuquerque, authorizing the execution of a project participation agreement and other documents in connection with the project.
Second.
There's a second from Councilor Lewis. Thank you. Ms. Ortega.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Davis.
Yes.
Thank you. Counselor Feeblecorn,
Yes.
Counselor Grout,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
9-0.
All right. That takes us to letter of introduction. Vice President Lewis.
I move approval of the letter of introduction.
And I'll second that motion. And we'll move on to the vote.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Feeblecorn,
Yes.
Counselor Grout,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you. We don't have any committee reports tonight, so we'll move to deferrals and withdrawals. Councilors, any deferrals or withdrawals at this time? Councilors Bassan and Pena.
Thank you, Mr. President. R190 is approving an intergovernmental agreement between the City of Albuquerque, the County of Bernalillo, and the Albuquerque Public School District Board of Education to reform the Albuquerque Bernalillo County Government Commission. I move deferral until February 23rd.
Is there a second? Councilor Davis seconded it. And the moving a deferral till the February 23rd. Ms. Ortega.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Feeblecorn,
Yes.
Counselor Grout,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
9-0 on the deferral to February 23rd.
And then Councilors Pena and Bassan also on R235.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is establishing federal programming and policy priorities for the city of Albuquerque for federal fiscal years 2022 and 2023. I move deferral until February 7th.
Thank you. And there's a second from Councilor Bassan. Ms. Ortega.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Feeblecorn,
Yes.
Counselor Grout,
Yes.
Counselor Jones, Counselor Jones.
Yes.
Thank you. Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
9-0 on the deferral to February 7th.
Thank you. We're now on consent agenda. Are there any changes to the consent agenda? See Councilor Pena.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to actually, I guess we could remove it from the consent agenda, but I think we have Director Sanchez here, and I know we have some information regarding the biopark admittance. It's one of the objectives that I had put in the budget this past year to come up with a plan on how to provide access for some of our underserved communities. So I don't know if Director Sanchez wants to give some input on that, or do we vote on the consent agenda first and then have her do a presentation and vote on that separately?
We'll just remove that. That's item A on consent. And then we'll move the rest of the consent agenda unless councilors have any other items that we'd like to remove at this time. And seeing none, I would like to say for the individuals on tonight's consent agenda who are being appointed to serve on a board or commission and who may be watching from home, thank you for your willingness to serve. You know, these boards and commissions are very important to us as a council to advise us. You know, we're not subject matters experts, and although we have a lot of expertise on the council staff, we rely on you. So thanks for stepping up. Council Vice President Lewis.
I reiterate that as well, Mr. President. Thank you specifically to Kathy Court for serving on the personnel board there. I move approval of the consent agenda.
Second, I'll second that. and Ms. Ortega.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Peopleborn,
Yes.
Counselor Grout,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
9-0.
All right. And so that takes us back to EC 21-472. This is the Department's Arts and Culture Priority Objective, Goal 7, Objective 4, regarding a study and options for creating biopark admissions and assistance program. And Councilor Pena, I think you mentioned that Director Sanchez might have some words for us, but you go first if you would like.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, this is a huge priority of mine, when we did the budget the last cycle. And I just really want to thank Director Sanchez because she's really put a lot of thought and effort into this. And I think they actually presented to us a while back about some of the options. And I think they've finalized their option. And this is what this consent agenda item is for. But I'd like her to talk a little bit about what the decision was and what we're going to be offering in our community. So Director Sanchez, thank you, Mr. President.
Director Sanchez.
Hello, Council President Benton, Councilor Pena. So this is simply our report today on possibilities and recommendations for how we could provide more financial accessible access to the biopark, since it is one of, well, no, it's not even one of, it is the most popular cultural institution in terms of attendance in our state. And I think it's really important that we find ways to make it financially accessible. And we have done some things that are within our purview. We are able to give some passes, but making any changes to admissions, of course, is within the purview of council. So I think some of the recommendations that you have in front of you would require additional work on the part of the department. We don't have any financial impact analysis with this, and it would require actually revisiting some of the admissions fees, which of course would need to go in front of council. So at this point, our recommendations are there. They're based on best practices around the country and successful programs that have worked at other bioparks, zoos, and aquariums. And one of the more successful programs has been looking at providing providing a reduced ticket entry for people who qualify for some kind of SNAP or EBT benefits, because they have already been vetted through a different process. So they present an EBT card with their ID, and then they are able to get a different admission price. So the city is not kind of vetting who is eligible. This works a little bit better than some of the things we've done with schools, because it also includes seniors who are EBT or benefit eligible, and single individuals. And so sometimes when we focus on the schools for accessibility, which is a place that we typically go to, then we leave out some other low-income individuals in our community. So at this point, this is our report on what's possible. If it pleases the council and they would like us to take it further, then we'll just wait for your input. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate that brief presentation. So I'm really looking forward to this. Like I said, I think this has been a priority for Director Sanchez. She's really put a lot of thought and hard work into it. And I look forward to, moving something forward that's amenable to all the council. So thank you.
Councilor, would you like to move the EC 21-472?
Yes, I think you just did. So I'll second it if you want.
Okay, very good. We could do that either way. That's been moved and seconded. And Ms. Ortega for the vote.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Peopleborn,
Yes.
Counselor Grout,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
9-0 on EC 472.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega. And we'll move on. We don't have any announcements tonight, or public hearings or approvals. So it takes us straight to final actions this evening. And we'll start with item A. And this is Councilors Bassan and Davis and myself, 078, amending Chapter 9, Article 4, Part 1, ROA 1994, the Police Oversight Ordinance. I'll move it do pass. And I see a second from Councilor Davis. Thank you. And we do have a number of amendments that we'll get up on the screen for you. And
Mr. President, if I may, just for a point of order.
yes, please.
That's probably not the right term, but Mr. President, could you, I know we have a number of amendments tonight. There was some discussion about whether we would just discuss these or take action on these this evening. Could the president tell us what he might intend to do this evening, whether he wants to just discuss them or defer them and for further action later?
Yeah, I will leave this up to the co-sponsors. I appreciate their work on this, and we also had former Councilor Sena involved in a lot of these discussions over the last going on a year, or I guess going on 3/4 of a year at this point. We know this is very important to obviously just to the proper functioning of a very important city board, but also has to do with our compliance with the CASA agreement with the Department of Justice, et cetera, et cetera. But I'll leave it. I feel like we're pretty far along myself on this. I don't know that we're under any extreme pressure between now and the 7th. If there are other ideas that are still out there, and I know there are a couple things that are not addressed by these amendments, so I'll leave it up to you and Councilor Bassan. Councilor Bassan, you want to weigh in?
Thanks, Mr. President. We could probably drag it out forever if we didn't just really, I want to say pull the trigger, but probably that's not also the right thing to say when we're talking about this. But if we don't just handle it, so to me, I don't really want to vote on the entire ordinance tonight, but I would be happy to discuss and hopefully maybe work through some of the amendments so that if there are more that come up in the next couple of weeks, we can, instead of have a lot later, we can kind of chip away at it now.
I would agree with that. And I see a thumbs up for our other co-sponsor. So let's move through these amendments, and we'll at least move the ball forward and can then decide whether we want to defer this or not. So this would be the first amendment. This would be floor amendment number 1 to 02178. And this council sponsored by the 3 co-sponsors of the main bill. And I need to read the whole thing. Yeah, I'll read the, actually, I'll ask Mr. Melendez to maybe summarize these as we go, because he's been very involved in all of these discussions.
Thank you, Mr. President, councilors. Julia Couladon in our office actually drafted these. And so we're going to have her go ahead and walk us through these. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Couladon.
Thank you, Mr. President and councilors. So this first amendment, amendment number 1, reduces the composition of the board from a 9-member board down to a 5-member board, plus a non-voting chairperson. The use of a non-voting chairperson specifically dedicated to officiating the meetings may help with the efficiency of the board, which has been sort of a struggle for this board. There are no requirements in the CASA for the number of members that should be on this board, and numbers vary across different cities with similar oversight agreements in place. The 9-member board is a carryover from the Police Oversight Commission, which was appointed based on council district. A 5-member board might be more efficient and easier to keep fully seated. Other amendments proposed within the ordinance update are aimed at reducing the board's workload. And since there is no hard and fast requirement for the number of members, other proposals for the size of the board can be evaluated as part of this amendment. And this amendment also directs that certain board members have background qualifications in criminal justice or with civilian policing councils.
All right, any questions, council staff, on this, or for the sponsors or comments from anyone? I can vouch for having gone through the whole thing. I think the only other counselor who was there for at the time, Counselor Lewis and then Counselor Jones were there. But we basically had a previous board that, amidst a lot of turmoil, that led to the DOJ getting involved, actually resigned, and we were in a position where we had to, several of them resigned, and then we were in the position of having to move fairly quickly. And I think there was some, obviously, that, as often is done, there was some framework there of the old system, and this is a legacy of that. So I think it's appropriate and makes sense. I certainly was in strong support of reducing the numbers on this board, given how difficult it is to fill it out, and also just hopefully to make their functioning easier. But we have questions and comments from first Councilor Pena and then Councilor Bassan.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I guess this was for Julia. I understand the intent of this because, we have some challenges with board members and maintaining board members. But my concern is that when we go down to 5 voting members, and it looks like we have people who primarily the board will consist of people from the criminal justice system, and then we have two members, one of them with community policing experience and the other one a general member. How do we ensure, because one of the biggest challenges that we've had throughout this is that how do we get community engagement, especially in populations that are most impacted by the reason the DOJ is here. I know there was a challenge in terms of the experience and who gets on the board and some of the requirements associated with that. But this really seems like it makes a seat at the table for some of the populations we're talking about just a little bit more difficult. So can you just help me to navigate through that?
Mr. President, Councilor Pena, in terms of the expertise requirements contained in this amendment, based on discussions with Chris Sylvan, who is sort of the council office liaison to the CPOA board, we do receive a number of applicants to this board that would qualify for these expertise requirements. And my understanding is that would not inhibit our ability to fill the seats on the board. In terms of community involvement, I'm not sure that I'm able to address that question for you. Unfortunately, I'm sorry.
So do we have Mr. Sylvan on the call, or do we have Mr. President? Yes, Mr. Sylvan. So can, Mr. President, can you tell me what the board consists of, who the board consists of currently? Like, what are the composition, whether they're community members, people from the criminal justice system currently? And who are we, and who was the goal aimed at attracting for the CPOA board?
Councilor Benton, Councilor Pena. Currently, the board consists of several members across the city. We base them on men, women. We also base them on where they live, and we also base them on race. And we do the best that we can to try to diversify the board. The idea behind this amendment was the CPC folks would be better served to jump on the board right away and be involved with the CASA and have a greater understanding of how the oversight board works.
Okay, so right now, currently, if we narrowed it down to 5 voting members, it wouldn't necessarily have representation from, for say, my district or any other district.
Counselor Benton, Counselor Pena, we would just have to look at the list of people that we have applied. We have a wide range of folks from across the city who have applied, and given how we staff the board, it's been very difficult based on how the applicants score when they apply to the board, and we try our best to make sure that we are geographically representing the city. We're also representing, like I said, men, women, and race. But no, by district, yeah, we probably wouldn't have it that way, to answer your question.
And so, Mr. President, for those who are on the committee who are selecting people, is some of the criterion prohibited in terms of, really kind of eliminating some people with less experience than others to be able to serve on the board? And what I mean by less experience is that sometimes through the application process, it really maybe doesn't serve to help some folks that are in these underserved populations. And I think I'm saying that correctly. So, because I know there's a challenge that sometimes people who would be great applicants get kind of weeded out through the application process.
Mr. President, if I may respond, I have a couple things that might help, or at least from my perspective with what Councilor Pena is asking. Thank you. In regards to the 5 members versus the original 9 that we had, through some fairly intense discussions and we worked with our staff, it was really recognized that a lot of applicants are not necessarily, it's not easy to fill just per council district. So this was going to be one of those where we ended up making sure that by having 5, we thought that might help minimize some of the need to have the geographic changes. But in addition to that, I think some of the next amendments coming up are going to help. And they were really intentional with the consideration of making sure that, for example, what you're talking about, Council Pena, with making sure that we can, specifically, at least in what I was thinking, is constituents from your district might not always have means of transportation or childcare or a whole bunch of different reasons to be able to devote time to this board, even though they would be interested in doing so. So that was part of what my goal was really trying to make sure that we could have some kind of compensation or stipend or the word we ended up with that I just blanked on.
Honorarium.
Thank you, honorarium. So I think that's part of it, in addition to the fact that the reason why there's 2 to 3 criminal justice experience and 2 to 3 members of community policing council was because at any given time, originally it was written for 2, 2, and 1. But now this offers a little bit of flexibility. So that way, if per se, there's 3 really great applicants with criminal justice or criminal justice system experience, which someone also mentioned that might be including a run-in with the law, we'll say, at some point in time, not just what I was originally thinking as criminal justice system experiences and a police officer of sorts, but this could be someone on all kinds of different spectrums with experience with the criminal justice system. So really, when we started breaking down some of these conversations, it started opening up some options to make sure that there was some more equity involved in the selection process. And going back to the 2 to 3 versus 2 to 3, if let's say we have 3 really great applicants from CPCs, then we would make sure that we have 1 with really great criminal justice system experience. So that way there was a little flexibility and we could make sure to keep it well-rounded in regards to that. So I don't know if that helps or makes it all worse, but there was a lot of discussions on trying to include more from the city while also making it a little bit more accessible and a better representation on the board.
Thank you. Let's hear from Councilor Davis, then we circle back to Councilor Pena with any follow-up.
Mr. President, thanks. Just for the record, I wanted the clerk to be sure that we caught that we had a second on this motion for the amendment, and she can record me if she desires. But also, I know that and Councilor Pena's issue is well taken. And I just want to point out that this doesn't replace the requirement for the council to consider geographic or social equity issues in appointments. It simply restates the number of persons, and it does retain the language relating to those balances, even though it doesn't say specifically per council district. That language is still there, and the council's analysis would have to consider that both publicly and internally in our debate. But Mr. President, I'd like to pass on any further comments so that our new councilors can participate.
Thank you, Councilor Pena.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, and I appreciate Councilor Bassan's jumping in there, because that's really has been my concern all along with the CPOA and CPCs, is how we get better representation, how we actually make a seat at the table for folks who, as eloquently as you put it, have had a run-in with the law, because these are some of the barriers that we have. So I'm not sure, although I appreciate the intent and I understand the struggles with making sure that we have 9 members on board. I really like the fact that we have somebody from each of our 9 council districts, whether we can find someone or not. I think just having that opportunity to have somebody from our respective districts at the table is important to me. I was hoping that maybe we can look at doing something else in terms of how the requirements were, or some of the requirements to be able to sit on the CPO board to alleviate some of those barriers was maybe the more appropriate thing to do. But I do appreciate the sponsors' intent on this, but I won't be supporting it. Thank you.
And Councilor Lewis is next. I just want to quickly say that, when I was referring to the previous history, the old Police Oversight Commission, that was districted by 9 districts. And there was a lot of discussion at that time with regard to whether that was working or not for a police oversight board. It was very much the citizens panel. And at that time, it kind of broke down. Not saying anything about the people involved, but that's what happened at the time. Council Vice President Lewis. You're muted, sir.
I'm gonna have to get used to that. I apologize. Mr. President, I do think that the other amendments, address some of the issues and challenges a little bit more specifically. And this one I did have some concerns about, because I think it rather than just really addressing a specific issue, it really just removes some of the, of being able to fill these positions. It just removes some of those positions. And I think that that by doing this, we do create a little bit of less diversity on this panel, as well as, we may not be able to have, all the geographical regions represented here. And so I do think there's some challenges just with this amendment. I do understand the intent. I think that the challenges are there. I think the other amendments address them a little bit more specifically that I'm a little bit more comfortable with. So I probably won't support this amendment.
All right, thanks. Anyone else? We'll go ahead. Then we do have a motion in a second. I think the second was from Councilor Davis, was the second on that. And we'll move to the vote on the amendment.
Councilor Bassan.
Yes.
Councilor Davis.
Yes.
Councilor Feeblecorn.
Yes.
Councilor Grout.
No.
Councilor Jones.
No.
Councilor Lewis.
No.
Councilor Pena.
No.
Councilor Sanchez.
No.
Councilor Benton.
Yes.
Motion fails on a 4-5 vote on amendment number 1.
And just a comment on that, that motion failing. I mean, I think there was discussion, what's the right number? So this may be something we ought to go back and still look at. I do still believe that 9 is a really big group of people to try to corral and talk about these very critical issues and complex issues. But we'll move on then to the next amendment. This will be a floor amendment number 2. And this is also sponsored by Bassan, Benton, and Davis. I'll move that, and second from Councilor Davis again. Thank you. So what this is we were just referring to is the honorarium or some form of compensation or incentive. And this has to do with basically would provide an honorarium of $500 on completion of the initial training. And then secondly, that each member of the board shall be compensated $250 upon completion of the required ongoing training as outlined in section 9415 F3. The amendment also inserts a new subsection about the board with regard to the stipend, and each member of the board would be compensated at a rate of $100 per regular meeting of the board. So it's not just every meeting of the board, but every regularly scheduled meeting of the board, not to exceed $200 a month per board member. So these are extensive training requirements, as you can see in the explanation. I'll leave it at that. And unless one of the other co-sponsors, Councilor Pursuant, would like to speak to it.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm wondering, so I had heard a little bit more, and I don't remember us necessarily discussing it because I was so focused on this particular board. But should we decide to move forward with this, how would this potentially affect all the other boards that are in existence in Albuquerque? So being that I did not really have that hat on when we were discussing this, I'm concerned about, I mean, for example, EPC, and you have different boards and commissions that's just one, but we have so many in this city that I wonder if this is something that, although I'm a huge advocate for wanting to make sure that we compensate these particular board members, I want to make sure that we are really considering the potential for the unintended consequences with this one.
And I'll just quickly make a comment on that and then hear from Councilors Davis and then Pena. Yeah, I think in the past, there has been discussion at one in previous years prior to the adoption of the IDO, the EPC was probably the other most high demand service, if you want to call it that, the most homework, the longest meetings, multiple meetings, and that had been discussed in the past. However, in that particular board of the Planning Commission, the workload was somewhat reduced by the IDO. Anyway, I think it's a fair question. And let's hear from Councilor Davis and then Councilor Pena.
Thanks, Mr. President. I agree with you. And you, me, and Councilor Bassan all agree. I think it's one to look at. Not so much, I think that, but my perspective is not so much that we should not do this. I think what we're trying to address here is sort of the professionalism required from this board. It is expertise. And I know that that the sponsors have looked at this extensively. The expertise and the amount of commitment of ongoing training to stay on top of the CASA requirements and the police training requirements, et cetera, is important. And we also had to take into consideration that in hearing from board members over the last few years, some are spending more than 40 hours in volunteer service just to keep up with reading documents, investigations, policy reviews, and otherwise. And so we wanted to do that. I would argue that that in the city, there are sort of some different tiers of boards and service that are instrumental or mandatory, or critical to the operation of the city's key metrics and functions. And the EPC, and there are probably a few others that should merit that. I would not be opposed to the city considering how we compensate folks for these specialty boards that require special service or technical expertise. But also, if we're going to recruit good people, we're asking them to set aside other obligations. And in this regard, we have had a real hard time keeping members on the board. And we've not had an incentive, a carrot, to get them to complete their training, except their promise to do so. And so this is a way to give us some accountability for board members who fail to complete their required training, and for us to show DOJ that we're sort of meeting them halfway, giving them a carrot and a stick. So for that reason, I think this is important. And to Councilor Pursuant's point, I think there are other boards we should consider that as well. We're going into budget and should probably do that.
And we do have some, when I get to the other councilors, Councilor Pena and Councilor Jones are in the queue here, but I did want staff to comment that they did look into other jurisdictions. Maybe we could have a quick update from them with regard to what they found when they were looking at other jurisdictions. Mr. Melendez or Mr. Sullivan?
Council President Benton and councilors, I looked into other jurisdictions, and what I found was there were 13 jurisdictions across the country that pay their civilian oversight board members some sort of stipend or what have you, an honorarium. And these range from like $12,000 for the Chicago Oversight Board to $50 for another board just for attending meetings and everything. So what we're attempting to do here with this amendment is not out of the ordinary. And several of these jurisdictions also are under DOJ consent decree as well.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Next up is Councilor Pena, followed by Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. Similarly, like the previous amendment, and I appreciate Councilor Bassan's thoughts about really revisiting this and looking deeper into it. I just have concern with providing stipends to which is considered here in Albuquerque volunteer board, and then we have tons of other boards that really their technical expertise, as we were talking about open space the other day, and there was questions about people's technical expertise on serving on that board and how important that expertise is to serving on these boards. I really look at it from, this is the perspective of getting, ordinary people from ordinary walks of life just to serve on these boards to really help us to navigate through this complex issue. And so for that reason, I really don't see us providing a stipend. And I kind of recall, and I don't know whether this was in my time as city council or doing the community work, is that there were some boards that we were paying for training, and I don't know if there were stipends or not, if there's anyone from the staff that can answer that, but it really turned into an issue for the city. So I just think maybe there's other creative ways we could look at as really encouraging participation or making it easier, whether it's online training courses or the like for some of our board members, so that it's not so cumbersome. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilor Jones?
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree with Councilor Pena. I don't believe anybody does this for any compensation at all other than what they give back to the city. But as I'm listening to this, I think of all of the boards that we've listened to over the years, and if we were lucky enough to speak to 2 or 3 of them in private, the number one thing that we hear is they don't get any training, they don't know what they're doing, they don't have guidelines, and they're lost. And I would think that rather than now we're trying to figure out how much money to give people who really aren't asking for money in any way, they want to volunteer for the city, they want to help their city. Why don't we meet with, or have staff meet with, so it's not any kind of a violation of what we do if that's a problem. Why don't we sit down with, in different groups, the EPC board and the CPOA board and the people, sit down with some of them and say, just tell us honestly, what do you think is wrong with this board? What could we do to make it better? How would you like to see it work better? And the work better, some of the things I've heard is they don't have to go to the rifle range and shoot and all that. What they're looking at is issues that have occurred or might occur. And I think we need to engage the people who are in the middle of this to tell us what they think is broken. So perhaps we can help fix that rather than coming up with our ideas of our own when we're only guessing. And again, very few volunteer boards volunteer for any kind of compensation other than, as most of us have done. When I ran for city council, I had no idea there was any compensation and I didn't care. We are there to make our city the best it can be, to make it safe for all of the people with us and for us. and to do the right thing. And I really think if we put together some study sessions and see if they will talk to Chris, to people who are willing to sit in and get some ideas, let them throw out ideas. And that's a time consumption issue. But I believe that most people who are on boards and are frustrated really like it when someone actually asks them what they think. So my 2 cents for what it's worth. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Jones. And I think we could ask, I mean, I think there has been a lot of discussion with board members, but let's hear from Councilor Bassan. And then we do have acting chair of the CPOA board, Chantal Galloway. We'll have her up next and followed by Councilor Lewis. Councilor Bassan.
Mr. President, I'm willing to either wait to do this or not, because I'm curious what everyone else has to say, but my intention is that I would like to end up not voting on this today so that we can really discuss it further, whether we need to defer it or just withdraw it just for now and then hear it on February 7th. But while everyone's here, I'm not opposed to hearing what they have to say if you would like that.
Yeah, you know, there's nothing to prevent us as sponsors, of course, from looking at an amendment that gets voted down and talking with other councilors about it, of course. But yeah, I agree. I mean, this has been a long haul, as we were saying, that a group of councilors have been meeting with the DOJ and the previous director of CPOA and others and members. But let's go ahead and we'll play this by ear and try to move this on. But I think the discussion is valuable. Let's move on and hear from Ms. Galloway.
Thank you, Council President Benton. I would very much encourage the council to consider what Councilor Jones just suggested. The board has been requesting for quite some time just to have somebody come and talk to us. We have made it to a couple of councilors, but it's been very, very challenging. And we have a whole new council that's before you now making these decisions. And so we would very much welcome the opportunity to just sit down and have a conversation. There are some of the amendments that came before you tonight that personally I'm in favor of. It's difficult for me to speak for the board, even though I'm the chair, because we received these amendments Friday afternoon and obviously can't come to a decision, but I know that we would be more than willing to given the time. And so I would ask the council to consider that track.
Thank you, Ms. Galloway. Councilors, any questions for Ms. Galloway while we have her on? Appreciate your being here. I'll move on to Council. Why don't you stay on, Chantal, just briefly while we're going through this. Councilor Lewis.
Mr. President and Ms. Galloway, let me first say, thank you. And I do look forward to talking with you, and I'd like to schedule that right away if we could. So I'll make sure we follow up with you on that and have a conversation with you about it. I'm looking forward to getting up to speed on a lot of things with your committee there. And thank you again. On the amendment, that's one of the things I was going to suggest. If we're not planning on, voting on the final action on the bill tonight, then let's defer this amendment as well. I'm actually not opposed to this amendment. In fact, I wouldn't be opposed to some compensation even for a committee like the EPC, although I don't think we're having the kind of problems on the EPC like we are on this as far as keeping members. But last time I appointed somebody to the EPC, I've been trying to make it up to that person ever since. It's an incredible amount of time, on that board and others as well. So I don't think this is a bad idea. I'm certainly open to it. But again, if we're not going to vote on the final bill tonight, I think let's take a little more time to think about this one.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Lewis. I'm going to ask, we have Councilor Davis, then I'd like to ask Ms. Culloden, who worked with us on these, to also just explain the amendments without us voting on them, maybe necessarily right now. And then we can see if we want to defer. I would support a deferral after that. There's also some issues of timeliness of getting the board reconstituted, because we do have vacancies, multiple vacancies. We are, as we stated earlier, or mentioned earlier, the council itself has responsibility under the consent decree to get the board filled out and to feel like it's functioning well. So, Councilor Davis.
You took the words out of my mouth, Mr. President. I was going to make the motion, but let's hear from our staff first. And I want to acknowledge and thank Ms. McDermott, who's our acting director of CPOA, who's here as well. But I do think that's the right approach to defer the rest of these amendments. Have some discussion and defer them until the 7th. But I agree with the president. We need a date to get this done. We are sort of under the gun to do this. The Department of Justice has made it clear, and we know that this board is not being supported well. It needs new members, but it's not good for us to appoint new members if we don't know what they're appointing to. So I think we should give a date final to do this, and I hope it is the 7th, but I'll wait to make that motion. So thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thanks. Let's hear from Julia on the remainder of these amendments that we had prepared for tonight anyway. And councilors, we encourage you to study those as we go forward, most likely with a deferral, but I think Julia can give us a good rundown on what remains here.
Certainly, Mr. President. And if Mr. Moya would be able to pull up the next amendment. Yes, thank you. So this third amendment adds a provision that would require the CPOA board to create a job description that would explain the expectations for members of the board. This would be drafted and submitted to the council for final approval, and all board members would be expected to read and sign the job description, which would affirm their understanding of their obligations to the board as a member. This is aimed at improving both prospective and current board members' understandings of their roles and responsibilities, and hopefully improving participation and retention of members in that they have a better understanding of what they're getting into in signing up for this board.
All right. And we do have a couple of other amendments from Councilor Sanchez. But yeah, just to summarize Julia's statement, you know, our perception, I shouldn't speak for others, my perception in developing this ordinance change is that I think councilors who have been here know that there have been pretty great difficulty in bringing the board up to a full contingent, and you know we have specifically with regard to this amendment that was just read, that the responsibilities maybe have not been spelled out well enough about what the appointment really entails, and so I think this and things like the honorarium, things like talking about the size of the board and the expertise that is needed on a board like this, that it is a citizens civilian oversight board, and so it should certainly represent the community, but it also is a very specialized board in this, in a sense that's similar to the EPC, because it, or even to the Open Space Advisory Board, because we're looking for people with we're looking for advocates, but we're also looking for regular folks. But all right, we're just trying to communicate with Vice President Lewis, because we were shut down. We were going to call a recess. We may, you know, if this continues, we may need to do that. It looks like we're okay right now. So I'm sorry for that. And I actually missed some of that conversation. So if we could start, circle back to Ms. Galloway, what her comment was. And then Also, Ms. McDermott, who's our acting director, is here as well, agency director. Go ahead, Ms. Galloway.
Thank you, Council President Benton. Yeah, Councilor Sanchez, we are required under the CASA to complete 2 ride-alongs every 6 months. And we just recently worked with the monitoring team to get approval to codify what that looks like. Those ride-alongs have to be a minimum of 4 hours, but are encouraged for longer because we agree. So I don't know if that's helpful at all, but that is required.
Yes, Chantel, I was totally aware of the fact that there was a 2 ride-along requirement. My goal for the amendment is basically to make sure that the people, feel what an officer feels like and know what the officer feels every single time that they're handling the calls for service. And that way, if you have a certain officer that you like to ride with or that you've have a relationship with, then at that point, that officer will be able to give you the insight that he has and maybe continue to help out even after the fact. And I know for a fact that I've actually had people ride along with me who I have become lifelong friends with. And I still talk to these folks throughout my life and throughout my career. And it all started with just a simple ride along. And it's amazing how the relationship can build to the point where both people can actually see what's going on. And if you have a chance to ride in 4 ride-alongs, which I think is very, very important, and that's what the amendment calls for, you would get to see 4 different individual officers. And during that time, you'll be able to actually develop a relationship with that officer. If you don't develop a relationship with one, you may develop a relationship with the second one. And at that point, then you would be able to gain that perspective. And I think that's really, really important in reference to what we're looking at, because I think if you attract more people to want to have a relationship with an officer and vice versa, then at that point, I think you're going to be able to fill these positions with a whole lot of ease, because, the word gets around that, hey, we're working together. And then I got the other amendment. Anybody want to chime in on this one?
Counselor, why don't you go ahead and explain your other amendment?
Okay. The second amendment is basically part of the training program that is on here. And again, my background as being a police officer and supporting the officers means that I think it's very, very important for the officers to have internal affairs training, including but not limited to training on all APD policies related to the use of force and APD's internal review of force incidents. And the reason why is because the officers themselves would totally appreciate a board who understands all the things that are going on within the disciplinary process. It is a large disciplinary process that takes quite a bit of time. One of the things that's very, very stressful is that when you're put into the system, your stress level immediately rises. And it's very, very difficult to even go to work when you have that monkey on your back. And so I think it's really, really important that anybody that's going to be making any kind of recommendations in reference to police action should be very, very familiar with what the police officer goes through. And I think that's very important, so they can see what the sanctions call for. They can see how the actual whole breakdown happens, when they receive the target letter, all the way through the process, and then the amount of time that it takes. And right now, knowing what's going on with the officers, there is a backlog of these use of force investigations that really, really need to be addressed by the administration, by the police department. And if we can get through them quicker, I honestly think that this would help the internal affairs training. And I would not have a problem being involved in my two amendments at all. I understand how they work very, very well. So I'd actually be able to facilitate and help with the process. The next thing that I want to just bring up is, I think that if the CPOA comes together a lot with the police department in a form of mediation. Back in my day, we used to do mediations. We would do a monthly mediation on the lower level uses of force. So if we got some of the CPOA members to participate in the mediation with the lower uses of force, at that point, I think we'd be able to solve a lot more problems and be able to move on to some more serious issues very, very quickly. Instead of dealing with those lower level issues within the meeting, those lower level issues would already be taken care of, and it would be taken care of with the combined effort of the CPOA and also the police officers. Primarily, I would suspect the lieutenant.
Got that.
So that's basically where I'm at in reference to these. And thank you everyone for your time. Council President, back to you.
Thank you, Councilor Sanchez. And if all right with you, I think I'm going to get back to our list of amendments. I want to withdraw my motion on amendment number 2, if that's acceptable to Councilor Davis, who seconded it. Yeah, thank you. Is that okay? So amendment number 2 is withdrawn, and I will move deferral until our meeting on the 7th of February. And there's a second from Councilor Davis on that. I appreciate the discussion. So there is a motion and a second for deferral. Ms. Ortega to call the vote.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilor Davis.
If she's asking, yes.
Thank you.
I'm usually next.
Yeah, we're having noise issues here. Councilor Evilcorn.
Yes.
Councilor Grout.
Yes.
Councilor Jones.
Yes.
Councilor Lewis.
Yes.
Councilor Pena.
Yes.
Councilor Sanchez.
Yes.
Councilor Benton.
Yes.
9-0 on the deferral of 078 to February 7th.
And encourage everyone to welcome to call up me, I'm sure, or any of the other sponsors on this to discuss it. And then Ms. McDermott, who I didn't really give a chance to weigh in, but I think with the deferral, I think if I can speak for her, that she's happy to discuss all of the above with you as well. Diane's been with the agency for a long, long time now. So, and a quick word, if you'd like, Diane, on our way off of this item.
Yes, President Benton, thank you very much. And councilors, I have been with the agency a very long time. I've seen successes and failures. I definitely welcome any questions. I appreciate any opportunity that you'd like for me to provide input. There are definitely some amendments that I see to the ordinance that will definitely improve. I think there's a few other things that need to be tweaked or revised. There are a few other things that haven't been contemplated in the existing draft that's been provided that probably would be wise to look over and address. So again, I'm open for any questions or information from any counselor that wishes.
All right, thank you, Ms. McDermott. Okay, we'll move on to our next item of business. This is R221, Councilor Pena.
Thank you, Mr. President. R221 is approving the One Albuquerque Age-Friendly Action Plan and directing the City of Albuquerque's Department of Senior Affairs to use the aging population study to implement a plan. I move a do pass. And Mr. President, we also have Director Sanchez here, so she can talk a little bit more about the action plan.
All right, thank you. And we have a second from Councilor Bassan. Ms. Sanchez.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Good afternoon or good evening, Council President Benton and members of the council. I'm Anna Sanchez, very pleased to meet you. I'm the director for the Department of Senior Affairs. And certainly I actually prepared a slide, if I may be able to show it, kind of gives something else to look at besides myself on the screen, if I may be able to share my screen.
Yes, we'll allow you. So go ahead.
Okay. See. I apologize, I'm not seeing it on my screen here. Let me see. You must close a window to open another. Here we go. Okay, here we go. Okay, there we go. Can you see that? Great.
Yes.
So the resolution before you, members of the council, I'll cut to the nuts and bolts of it. We'll create a dialogue about aging in our community. We know that we've experienced lots of lessons during COVID. And this recent study that was asked by Councilor Pena, the aging population study, really just highlighted the fact that our aging population is growing. It's growing faster than our younger population. The most recent census, if you noted in the recent census, it actually highlighted the fact that nationally, we are also challenged by a stagnant population growth. I mean, I think this is the most stagnant population growth we've had literally since the 1900s. So this is a national opportunity or challenge, the way you look at it. Certainly what we are hoping that this resolution is able to do is create a voice for our seniors. We want to be able to address these realities and to also be thoughtful about how do we engage this growing population and segment of our population in thoughtful ways. Further, this resolution is going to allow us to be able to push the aging lens across city departments with outside stakeholders and really make our older adults visible when it comes to making community-led decisions. So we know that our department will continue to do our critical service and operations, transportation, home delivered meals. Certainly, as you saw during COVID, all those were very important. This resolution just presents an opportunity for us to be able to enhance what we do. And so we are excited to be able to have this resolution to be able to allow us to work cross communities to enhance our services and programs. And just for context sake, one of the most recent things that we've been embarking on with a community partner addresses technology and seniors. We at our senior centers have computer labs. We had never provided in-person support for our seniors. We are doing that now. We also are trying to make it a community conversation about how technology can support our seniors for isolation, also continue to maintain their independence in living. So we are bringing that with the help of partnerships out in the community and being able to do that on a larger scale. So that is an example of what this resolution presents opportunities for us. So certainly we continue to be the voice for our older adults and appreciate this consideration for this resolution to be passed hopefully before you tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Councilors, thank you, Director Sanchez. See any right now, but we'll take it back then to sponsor, Councilor Pena.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just in closing, this is very important. I know we've talked to Director Sanchez when we actually did the aging population study. And as you know, and I think she mentioned, 40% of our population is by the year 2030, that will account for our total population in Bernalillo County. So, just knowing some of the challenges that I've had in this area of making sure that we have like senior services and senior care, and really looking at our budgetary issues that we have, as you know, the Senior Affairs Department's one of the lower funded departments, but yet they've done such an incredible job. And as she's talking about the pandemic, the number of meals that they've provided and how efficient her department has run is just is just one example of how we really need to pay attention to this vulnerable population that we have in our city. So I urge your support.
Thank you, Councilor Pena. It's been moved and seconded, and we'll go to Ms. Ortega for the vote.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Feeblecorn,
Yes.
Counselor Grout,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you. Next item is R225. This is myself and Councilor Davis. This is approving a form of master development agreement for implementation of the South Campus Tax Increment Development District. I move a do pass, and a second from Councilor Davis. Thank you. And this is a tax increment development district proposal from the with the university, and we have a staff report on this, or no, that we do. We did have some folks signed up from UNM. Are they back? Let's see.
I see Kim signed it.
Kim Murphy from Lobo Development is with us. Kim, do you want to pitch in? And then we also have Chris Muirhead and Mr. Mendergone. So Kim, you want to start?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President, members of the council. I know that Teresa spoke in the public comment section. I believe she has some comments, some remarks she'd like to make at the outset here. I don't know if she's in our waiting room, but could we?
I think she's getting on right now, and we'll get to her.
That would be great. Teresa is our Senior Vice President for Finance and Administration at the university.
Thank you very much. It took a little while to get back on as a panelist. So, Mr. President and members of the council, my name is Teresa Costantinides. I serve as the Senior Vice President for the University of New Mexico. And we are very pleased to bring before you the approval of the Master Development Agreement component of the South Campus Tax Increment Development District. The City Council approved the Development District in October, and this meeting is to approve the explanation for how the actual TID will operate, what will be funded. And we have several people who are here to speak or to answer questions about the Tax Increment Development District or about the Master Development Agreement. So I do want to recognize Fred Mondragon, who is here to speak in favor of it. And really, because this has kind of become a component, an action activity within the overall TID. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but we are happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Thank you. Next, Kim, did you want to speak any further, Mr. Murphy?
Yeah, I appreciate Teresa's opening remarks there. I just would like to emphasize again that the Master Development Agreement is contemplated in the State Act. It's a three-party agreement between the city, the university, and the district itself. The district is a party to the agreement. It's a fairly technical document dealing mainly with the financing of infrastructure. The infrastructure list that is attached to the development agreement is essentially that's contained in the TID development plan and the feasibility study, which was approved back in October. There have been some clarifications that were proposed by the administration, which we welcomed, for the various infrastructure having to do with pedestrian improvements around sports facilities. A little more information about the BART transportation line that'll be on University Boulevard, infrastructure for recreation facilities and recreation fields and sports facilities. So I would, I guess, look to perhaps Lawrence, if he's available, to maybe provide some further comment on the development agreement that's been reached between the city and the university.
All right, let's hear from the administration. Mr. Rao, if he's available, and then we'll hear from Mr. Mondragon.
Mr. President, members of the council, good evening. Damian Lara, from our Economic Development Officer, Interim Director, will give you a little bit more of the specifics. So I'll turn it over to him, if you don't mind, Mr. President.
Thank you, Director Lara.
Thank you so much, President Benton, councilors. As indicated by Mr. Murphy, we've looked at the Master Development Agreement. We are recommending a final approval. We did work and negotiate both with the university as well as with Global Development to ensure that both the council's priorities, including some additional amenities for open spaces and trails, were included. Additionally, the infrastructure that was already mentioned for pedestrian safety and other public safety attributes that were included, all of which would be eligible for public financing and reimbursement by the TID. We do believe it's a good project both for the city, the residents of Albuquerque, as well as the university and local development. I'm happy to answer any specific questions you may have as well. And just so that you are aware, our bond counsel, Chris Muirhead, is also available to answer any technical questions you may have.
Thank you, Director Lara, and everyone has worked so hard on this from both the city and the university. Fred Mondragon is here with us and signed up to speak on this as well. So, Mr. Mondragon.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, members of the council. I'm here again to speak on the R225, the Master Development Agreement. This is the logical next step in making the tax increment development district possible. It creates an area, and I'm going to speak directly to the benefits of this agreement. It creates an area which is desperately needed in attracting new companies within the city limits with an area that provides additional land. That not right now, there's not that much land available within the city of Albuquerque, within the city limits. And so we haven't been able to, to go after large companies, that have settled in Los Lunas and other places. So secondly, I think it fills in a gap. We drive to the airport and we see this huge area there that's just sitting there fallow between, the Science and Technology Park at UNM, the downtown area, and the airport and the international. There's a new tech hub that's developing in North Tijeras Arroyo. The Mesa del Sol development will benefit as well. So it generates between 4,000 and 5,000 jobs initially, high-paying jobs in research and technology and international activities as well. In addition to that, I think it has the potential of making Albuquerque science and technology, sort of creating a regional hub, regional innovation hub that will be the equivalent of for example, the Silicon Valley, the areas around the Boston corridor, as well as the tri-state area of North Carolina. So generally, it's just a fantastic economic development opportunity for the city, for the university, for the area. Very, very strong recommendation, Mr. President. Again, on behalf of the University of New Mexico, of which I'm an alumnus, as well as City of Albuquerque and the economic development sector. Thank you again, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Mondragon. Thank you for your service to the city and currently is on the development board. So very much appreciated. And your comments. Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just very briefly to give kudos here while we are going around the room. And thank you to the Mr. President, Councilor Benton. This is technically in your district, this TID, but it borders mine and the residents of our neighborhoods in Southeast travel this corridor every day. We are active and encouraging members of the UNM community and neighbors of our university and are so excited to see this kind of development. And we are encouraged to see some of the retail options that we think will continue to support development there. And thank you to Mr. Mondragone. He's absolutely right. Reminding the council that in the city of Albuquerque, it was a hard year last year. None of us have to be reminded of that. But on the numbers, we added about 6,000 jobs and new jobs in the city of Albuquerque last year. 4,000 of those were within a mile of this potential new development and master development area around Netflix, around Mesa del Sol, the Gibson corridor for space tech. All of those things that are happening in the exciting southeast part of our city that really do show us that the city's on the rise, and we're getting ready to lead in the space tech into the new economy. So thank you to this council for supporting this, and thank you to our UNM partners for bringing it in. And I want to say thank you to the administration who pushed us to do more than we normally do in these deals to make it a better deal for everybody. And so thank you to that. While we all have your, since we can't do it in person, we'll all say thank you to our UNM team and our friends for doing that.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Bassan and then Councilor Pena.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know that I had spoken with some constituents late last year when this first came to us, and there's some reservation about the government to government regards with the TID when normally that's not traditional. I do know that I've learned about and see that there are some additional benefits now that the administration has worked, and Director Laura, you kind of touched on those as far as what the city could get back in addition to some of the tax revenue later. But I think that it would behoove us, if you don't mind, Director Laura, to make sure that we kind of spell those out a little bit just for the public to understand, because I do think it makes a significant difference that we're not just doing this state or government to government entity without some kind of alignment as to how the city can benefit, in addition to what's just been mentioned as far as jobs and some of the economic development. If you don't mind, Director, would you please let the public know a little bit about some of those additions that got put in?
Thank you, President Benton, Councilor Brisson. Absolutely, as you indicated, we did have some additional infrastructure needs that were requested, not only by the administration, but by members of the City Council as well, that really increased the quality of life and public safety for the residents of Albuquerque, particularly in this area in the corridor, as been mentioned by other councilors. This really is an underutilized and underinvested and historically underinvested area of Albuquerque. There are about, as presented in your staff analysis, approximately 82 acres of vacant land that will be taken up in this district. And so those improvements will be made. Additionally, there's some open spaces and trails and amenities that will provide a better quality of life for the residents in the area. There are also a lot of public safety and improvements such as shot spotters and some additional police substations that will be going into the area. There are also some amenities in and around the streets that will be UNM themed areas, as well as the pedestrian safeties in and around the sports facilities areas that will provide more access. Again, I don't have to go into the details of what's been in the news in this past several years of pedestrians and pedestrian casualties that have occurred. Those will all be a priority in the first few years of the area to be moving that forward. As mentioned by Mr. Murphy, we're also working closely to ensure that we have more public transportation and more accessible public transportation for the residents of the areas, including the BART, which would be a new corridor for public safety. These are concerns and desires that have been expressed by the business industry, aligning that corridor through University all the way from the airport, and future development possibly contemplated connecting the Netflix facilities and the necessary public transportation that they're asking for all along that area, along University, through the airport, Mesa del Sol, and all the way down to Central as well. Additionally, that will bring in a lot of infrastructure money from the federal government that would be net new monies brought in to the state of New Mexico for that public infrastructure that nobody has to pay for, except for, of course, the federal government. And so those are all put into that area as well. And finally, some additional improvements along Lomas as well, and some transportation for services to ensure, again, public safety, both as the shot spotter, some transportation and operations to ensure that residents in the area are provided and can be transported to necessary services when appropriate.
Thank you. Mr. President, if I may, is that okay?
Please.
Thank you, Director. I think that, and that to me makes it a lot easier to swallow when there was some argument before about the traditional method of using a TID versus what we were looking at doing now, especially that we're touching on transportation, but also services and infrastructure that the city can benefit from. So I really am grateful to that. I hope that the constituents that were concerned before have a little bit more ease hearing that information as well.
Thank you. Councilor Pena.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also just wanted to thank the administration. You know, I had some discussion, and I appreciate Councilor Bassan in highlighting how important through some of the discussions with the administration, some of the information that was put in as part of this agreement, and UNM's willingness to kind of just work with us to make sure that we ensure public safety and ensure that this is in the best interest of all our constituents, both UNM's in the city of Albuquerque and obviously Bernalillo County. I don't have the reference in front of me. I'm actually looking for it. It's in one of the exhibits, but UNM Hospital, which is different from this TID, is actually, has the indigent fund. And as you know, homelessness is a big issue for us in the city of Albuquerque. And since I can't find it, I just want to commend the UNM TID for, making.
That's, I think, on her end. Looks like Councilor Pena may be having connection difficulties, so we've got two-way challenges going here. But yeah, good points made by Councilor Pena and Councilor Bassan and Councilor Davis. If you look at this area of the city, it could be characterized as a food desert. We hear that term quite often, food desert, meaning that you have very few options as far as just basic shopping. There, now you're back.
I think I'm back. Sorry.
Time there, Pennsylvania.
The best speech of my life, and I was muted. No, I was just saying that I just want to thank the administration and the folks from the UNM, because their commitment with everything that Mr. Lara talked about, and Councilor Bassan, making sure that those are recited to the public, I think are important. I also just wanted to highlight that in one of the exhibits, in addition to this, that, and this wasn't necessary because we have the indigent fund with the UNM hospital, and obviously two very different things, but homelessness, as you know, is an issue for all of us, whether you're part of Bernalillo County, UNM, city of Albuquerque, whoever it may be. So in one of the recitals, it just says, in cooperation with the city and the university infrastructure to address homelessness within the district. So I appreciate that. I know that sometimes language like that's not related to this is hard to get in, and I appreciate everybody's willingness to make sure that we focus on that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Pena. Yeah, I mean, with regard to our partnerships with UNM, and just major community partnership now with trying to tackle the homelessness issue through the coordinating council is so much appreciated. And I was just making the point that some of the neighborhoods surrounding these sites are South Broadway, San Jose, Clayton Heights, Kirtland, generally neighborhoods who have often cried out and sometimes came close to getting a supermarket just in that area. Just simple things like that are going to improve quality of life for folks in the area, I believe. And so that's why I think this is such an important partnership working on this TID. I don't see anyone else's hands raised, and I do see that Mayor's Conference from Mr. Rao.
Mr. President and members of the council, I just want to also add my 2 cents of this has been a really interesting process, and obviously the university has been very willing to work with the city, and all of the issues that Councilor Bassan just asked us to recite are really super important for the community as a whole. And as we look at this development moving forward, jobs, security, and safety for both the university and the city are super important, especially as the university is an anchor, if you will, a business and or educational facility for the whole state of New Mexico. So with that, Councilor, just thank you all for your support and your patience in working through this. And as you all would say, we urge your support.
Thank you. We very much appreciate the work that's been done by the administration, Mr. Al and Director Lara. And with that, I will urge your support, and we'll go to a vote.
Councilor Bassan.
Yes.
Councilor Davis.
Yes.
Councilor Feeblecorn.
Yes.
Councilor Grout.
Yes.
Councilor Jones.
Yes.
Councilor Lewis.
Yes.
Councilor Pena.
Yes.
Councilor Sanchez.
Yes.
Councilor Benton.
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is item E, Councilor Bassan and Pena, R226.
You want to take it? Go ahead, Councilor.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. President and Councilor Pena. R226 is establishing a redistricting committee pursuant to Article 4, Section 3 of the City Charter to review and make recommendations concerning the 9 council districts, repealing enactment R 2010-103 and R 10-109. I move it to pass.
And I see a second from Councilor Feeblecorn.
And Mr. President, we do have some amendments.
All right. And we will put those up on the screen, Mr. Moya. And let the sponsors take these on. Just a second. Bear with us, everyone.
And Mr. President, while we wait, if I may.
Please.
I see Ms. Morris is on here as well, so I'm happy to move the amendments. They're pretty straightforward, but just for the sake of clarity and without having to duplicate anything, I'd be happy if she were to help out with that.
Okay, great. And looks like we're getting it up on the screen here. Get that any larger? Julian, that's great. Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks. So this would be floor amendment number 1. Councilor Bassan and Councilor Pena.
Thank you, Mr. President. So on page 2 and beginning on line 29, revise section 5C to read as follows: adherence to existing precinct boundary lines, excepting those precincts which are divided by municipal boundary lines. This amendment proposes to provide some flexibility between council districts and precinct boundaries. A precinct should only be split to account for any awkwardness caused by precincts being affected by city boundaries.
And you want to move that? Go ahead and move that.
Yes, I do move that.
Okay, and Councilor Pena, a second. Is that all right? Thank you. So that would be floor amendment number 1. Any further discussion or explanation? Ms. Morris, it sounded like Councilor Bassan covered that pretty well. She's nodding. Councilor Jones, sorry, I see you now. Sorry, I'm getting used to these hands here. All right. You're muted, Councilor Jones.
Would someone please define for me give me the definitions for the boundaries and what we can and cannot do?
Mr. Chair, Councillor Jones, councillors, So the boundary lines that this section is talking about these are the guidelines for what the redistricting committee should be considering. And so this is in a larger section that talks about what the redistricting committee should take into account. It requires them to take into account the need to comply with constitutional principles governing voting rights, population, and other related matters. The desirability of council districts that are relatively compact with as few geometric extremes as possible. And then this amendment affects number C, the adherence of precinct boundary lines. And so in general, it's considered best practice in redistricting that precincts not be split within council districts or between council districts. And so that is what this section C recommends, is that we adhere as much as possible to the precinct boundary lines. But this amendment adds an exception when the precinct boundary lines go outside of the municipal boundaries. An example of this is there's a precinct towards the North Valley that goes through the city and then into Los Ranchos and then back into the city. And so in order to incorporate that precinct entirely into one council district, it would be really difficult because there's a chunk of Los Ranchos Village that's in the middle of it. And so that doesn't really follow the municipal boundary lines. And so in that instance, it makes a little bit more sense that part of that precinct is today in District 2 and part of it is in District 7. So that's an example of when we might not want to follow the precinct boundary lines and instead do something that's slightly different for a council district boundary.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. And who, if I may, Mr. President, Ms. Morris, who polices this redistricting to be sure that something like that isn't done unless it's absolutely necessary, of course?
Mr. Chair, councillors, that's an excellent question. Ultimately, you guys. But initially, that will be something that the consultant that we have hired for this research and polling will be considering when they put the maps together. And then when the redistricting committee are considering those maps, that's something that they are initially tasked with considering. And if there are maps that come forward that for some reason have to split precinct boundary lines, that will be something that the redistricting committee will have to consider very carefully and consider why it might be appropriate. And so this language in the bill provides the redistricting committee that consideration. And then ultimately, when the redistricting committee makes its recommendations to council, it's you guys in thinking about which map you eventually choose in considering that.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Any other discussion on the amendment? It's been moved and seconded. Seeing none, we will go to the vote on the amendment. Number 1.
Councillor Bassan.
Yes.
Councillor Davis.
Yes.
Councillor Feeblecorn.
Yes.
Councillor Grout.
Yes.
Councillor Jones.
Yes.
Councillor Lewis.
Yes.
Councillor Pena.
Yes.
Councillor Sanchez.
Yes.
Councillor Benton.
Yes.
9-0 on amendment number 1.
Thank you. We'll move to amendment number 2 for your sponsors.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I would like to move amendment number 2 on page 2 and beginning on line 30, add a new section 5B to read as follows and renumber accordingly. Districts shall be drawn consistent with traditional districting principles. Districts shall be contiguous and shall be responsibly compact. To the extent feasible, districts shall be drawn in an attempt to preserve communities of interest. In addition, and to the extent feasible, the committee may seek to preserve the core of existing districts and may consider the residents of incumbents. This amendment proposes to add the additional consideration for committee to consider And this additional consideration calls for the districts to consider traditional districting principles of equal population, minority voting rights, contiguity, compactness, and communities of interest.
And would you like to second that, Councilor Pena? All right, a second from Councilor Pena on amendment number 2. That seems pretty clear. These are kind of key components, I think, Ms. Morris, right, of redistricting law and constitutional law of these considerations. Am I correct?
My face is starting to look more.
Mr. Chair, councillors, yes, these 3 amendments from Councillors Bassan and Councillor Pena are considered kind of best practices in the realm of redistricting, and are just kind of an improvement to the language in the bill.
Thanks. Councillor Lewis.
Mr. President, I guess I'm just questioning the need for it. I mean, if these are best practices and are they just out there as these are known things that should be put in place, and so we're actually putting them on paper. I guess I'm just questioning the need for it. I mean, and maybe Petra could explain that a little bit further.
Ms. Morris.
Mr. President, councillors, yes. It is something that is, as I said, is considered best practice, and the best place for everyone to kind of know what those best practices are is to have it in the resolution that is guiding the work of the redistricting committee. And so that's why we're proposing to put this into the bill.
I guess, Mr. President, I guess I would, it seems like we're given some direction that where we could, I mean, how far do we take this? I mean, we could literally take this and say, there'll be no, boundaries beyond, say, the river, I mean, that would cross the river. I mean, we could take this pretty far in this regard. And so I guess I'm just wondering why these amendments, I mean, why these statements, and maybe the sponsors could explain a little bit further. I mean, are we trying to guard against something? Are we, I mean, even the first one, to be honest, I mean, I mean, how often are we, I mean, what are we really trying to guard against when we're trying to keep from splitting precincts? What do precincts really have to do with what the goal is here?
I'll see, I think that's Councilor Pena and then Councilor Bassan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Actually, to Councilor Lewis's questions is really when we initially drafted this resolution, we actually just omitted some of these best practices. And after discussion with some folks, it was important that that we should include them because it really just guides us in terms of how we define our boundaries. So it was really, I think, just an omission on at least my part.
Councilor Bassan.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I do think that it's important that we do what we can to prevent anything from happening when we can foresee some possibilities happening. For example, the contiguity, that word, contiguous, where they're all connected. I think it's really important that we make sure that we don't have little islands that are created. I think that it seems obvious, but I think that there is also some debate, especially in recent times, where people are concerned about making sure that everything's touching, everything is, not going to have some kind of void in it, but also that we're not going to intentionally, or maybe without putting this into the resolution, I think that it leads to the potential for these people that are being selected to be on this the census committee and the redistricting committee to be able to say, oh, well, these are kind of the checks and balances of what we need to make sure to include in this. So I know that the people that I have spoken with that want to be on this have never done something like this before. And I think it's important that we lay out what is common practice, and the best place to do that is going to be in something like the resolution we are creating today.
Councilor Pena, did you have another comment?
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I was actually choking the last time I spoke, but I just wanted to add to it is that if you just go and you look up the basic principles of redistricting, everything that we have here is outlined within that. So it's just really, as Councilor Bassan is describing, just putting it into the resolution so that when people who have never necessarily participated in this have kind of a tool and a guide in terms of what are some of the basic principles of redistricting. So these aren't anything that we drafted on our own. This is something it's outlined in redistricting.
And Councilor Lewis, I see you got your hand up. Is it okay if we hear from Councilor Jones and then go back to you?
Yes.
All right, Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is, I was lucky enough to serve on one of these one time, and it was an eye-opener. But we also had consultants who helped guide us in right and wrong and how we do this. I am assuming, please, that we are providing consultants for the groups who are doing this. And the people who will be, how do you select the people who participate, the citizens who participate in the redistricting? What is the criteria and how are they selected? I think those were all supposed to be questions of someone.
Thank you. It's a good point. I had a similar question as to how are we going to staff, you know, the committee, and maybe just like to speak to that, Ms. Morris, and then we'll get to Councilor Lewis again.
Mr. President, just I'm not going to support the amendment, and I think that the committee should consider all the best practices. And this is not anything against the sponsors. It's just that I'm just not quite sure if the statement really reflects what the kind of guidance that we should be giving them. I think they should consider all the best practices, and I'm not sure if these particular ones are any more important than the others. So I'm not going to support the amendment.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Bassan.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I know that you had called on Ms. Morris as well, but it's my understanding that when we were talking about this, I know that when I was discussing it with Ms. Morris and Councilor Jones, thank you for kind of bringing this up too, but we have been talking, and these have come from Brian Sanderoff and his consulting and his expertise. So this is why I know I had put my name on some of these amendments, is because we were being told that this is recommended practices. In addition to the fact, to answer the question, President Benton, that you had mentioned too, you know, we each get to select 2 people. We have and it's written in here where we select the one primary and then one alternate, but they are going to be, and Ms. Morris will do this much more eloquently, but they will be with some consultation and some guidance through using the proper group that we have forever. As far as I'm concerned, it seems like I don't know anybody before then, but so I think we're not definitely saying we want to pick people in each district to do this and then setting them out with only this resolution as a tool. However, it has been recommended that this get added in, and Ms. Morris can correct me if I'm wrong or add some more into that, please.
Mr. President, councilors, yes. Hang on a second. So we do have a consultant that we're working with on this, and they helped us with reviewing the resolution. And so we recently met with them and reviewed the resolution as drafted, and they pointed out that there were a couple things that we hadn't quite completed, and these are the 3 amendments that are before you this evening. And in general, when we're working on these, committees tend to prefer having a little bit more direction than less direction. As Councilor Jones and Councilor Bassan mentions, the folks that we have on the committee in many instances have never served on anything like this before. And so having these very basic principles in the resolution helps provide that direction. These amendments are really about what these best practices are. We're not going to be getting into other recommendations, but these do come from general best practices of redistricting committees. I think Councilor Jones might have had another question that I can't quite remember.
Did you have a follow-up, Councilor Jones?
No, I'm fine with this. Thank you.
Councilor Pena.
Just one last thing, that there are no competing lists. This is actually just the principles of redistricting, and it was omitted, and they notified us that, these principles weren't in there, so we put in the amendments. Thank you.
All right, thanks for that. And let's see, we did get a motion and a second for the amendment. This is amendment number 2. And Ms. Ortega to call the vote.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Feeblecorn,
Yes.
Counselor Grout,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
No.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Benton.
Yes.
Motion passes on an 8-1 vote for floor amendment 2.
Thanks. And there is a third amendment from Councilor Bassan and Councilor Pena.
Mr. President,
Councilor Lewis, yes.
I'd like to make a motion to reconsider Amendment 1.
There's a motion to reconsider Amendment 1, and we'll need a second for that. And is that a second, Councilor Davis?
Point of order, Mr. President. Is it the one we just voted on, or I'm just
That
trying
was
to remember.
the one before. That was number 1 had to do with divisions of precincts when municipal lines are involved. Is there a second?
For the purposes of letting the counselors correct their vote or make a record, I'll second it just so we can do it.
All right, there's a second for reconsideration of amendment number 1. And Ms. Ortega, call that vote.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. And to clarify for the newer counselors, we will first take a vote to reconsider. It requires a majority. And then we go back to amendment 1 and take a revote. So just to make that clear to everyone. Counselor Bassan,
No.
Counselor Davis,
Sure, yes.
Counselor Feeblecorn,
No.
Counselor Grout,
No.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Benton.
No.
Counselor Benton?
No.
Thank you. That passes on a 5-4 vote. Now we go back to amendment number 1. Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes, again.
Counselor Feeblecorn,
Yes.
Counselor Grout,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
No.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sanchez. Counselor Sanchez?
Yes.
Thank you. Counselor Benton,
Yes.
8-1 on amendment number 1.
All right, that takes us back now to floor amendment number 3, Councilors Bassan and Councilor Pena.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to move floor amendment number 3 on page 2 and beginning on line 25, add a new section 5D to read as follows. The committee shall not use election or voter registration data when considering district boundaries. This amendment proposes to add an additional criteria that would prohibit the use of election or voter registration data when considering council district boundaries. The city council is a non-partisan elected body.
And I think I see a second from Councilor Pena. Thank you. There's a motion and a second. Any questions? Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to ask either Ms. Morris and Kiyoshi or our sponsors if they could just help me a little bit with this. I understand the nonpartisan nature and appreciate that very much. But we've also, during our conversations around public financing, for instance, we've brought up and we do consider the fact that different parts of town have different voter participation rates. And although I know in representation, we want to be sure that our workloads are equal and that we can give our constituents equal time. But it strikes me that in order to ensure that everyone's vote counts equally for those who do vote, there's an argument to be made that we should at least consider voter participation as one of the factors when drawing these lines. And so I'm curious if there's a reason for prohibiting it, or if it's more appropriate to let the committee consider those factors, if for no other reason than so they can draw lines to ensure or to encourage more participation. I'm just curious.
Mr. President.
Yes, Councilor Bassan.
Thank you. So I don't want to speak for Councilor Pena, and I can, this one was one of those that was recommended, so I can understand both ways. I understand that we're nonpartisan, but I too also realize that when determining public financing and things of that nature, but that's during campaigning, which is kind of what this goes to as well. So I don't know if Ms. Morris has something a little bit more clear as to why this was recommended, that we do include this versus not, or if Councilor Pena has a more specific guideline. It was recommended, though, my understanding from Sandaroff and his group for these best practices.
All right. I'll ask Ms. Morris to answer that if she can, then Councilor Jones has a question.
Mr. President, councillors, as Councillor Bassan mentioned, yes, this is a recommendation from our consultants that it's generally best practice. At the committee stage, his recommendation was that if election data does kind of get involved at the committee stage, the conversation can get very politicized very quickly. He recognized that election data and registration data does often later get considered, but his recommendation was that at the committee stage we focus on other demographic information that comes in from the census in considering stuff, and that the allowance for election voter registration and election data can make stuff get politicized quite quickly. But that is as you mentioned, public financing and stuff like that, that it is very much, this aspect of best practices is very much a policy call on your part.
All right, Councilor Jones, you have a follow-up on that?
Just, I think it's a great piece to put in there. It feels good, it sounds great, but we all know that is not what's going to happen. So it's just a part of what is how these are set up, and that's what's going to happen. It's happened 10 years ago, it happened 20 years ago, it'll happen this time around. So I appreciate your adding it and hoping that somebody will listen, but the odds are that's not going to happen. So that's why the redistricting happens, is to create different, in my opinion, political boundaries. So but thank you for trying. I hope it works. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thanks. Councilor Bassan, then Councilor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Councilor Jones, I think that thank you for that as well. But I think that that's a great way of phrasing it, is what Ms. Morris said, that this is ideally based off of census data. Whether people vote or not, we still are supposed to be representing them. Although, to Councilor Jones's point, that's not always what happens, but we are supposed to be counting people, not voters. And I think that means that we should try our best, and we should put this in here if that means that we're doing what we can to try our best.
Thank you. Councilor Lewis and then Councilor Pena. You're muted, Dan.
All right. Mr. President, I do understand the intent. I'm not going to have any heartache if this doesn't pass, or if this amendment passes. But I do think that there's just unintended consequences of defining it like this a little bit more, because people are going to take data like registration data. They're going to come to these meetings, with that data, at least with it in their minds, and there's going to be decisions made that are influenced by that. And so again, I won't support it because of that. Again, I understand the intent. I don't think it should be added in there.
All right, thank you. Councilor Pena.
So I'll just be real brief. Just agree with Councilor Jones and Councilor Bassan. I mean, this is just something that's part of the recommendation. It wasn't Sandoval himself. It was the consultants when we had them review the resolution and, part of the basic principles of redistricting. And yes, unfortunately, as Councilor Jones stated, is that even though we have this basic information and guidelines that we're supposed to follow, unfortunately, sometimes that doesn't quite happen. So I think as a reminder of some of these basic principles is important, at least as a guide moving forward. So thank you.
All right. If we have any more discussion, we'll move to a vote. Ms. Ortega.
Councilor Bassan.
Yes.
Councilor Davis.
No.
Councilor Feeble-Corn.
Yes.
Councilor Grout.
Yes.
Councilor Jones.
Yes.
Councilor Lewis.
No.
Councilor Pena.
Yes.
Councilor Sanchez.
Yes.
Councilor Benton.
Yes.
Motion passes on a 7-2 vote for floor amendment 3.
Thank you. We have one more amendment. I'm sponsoring this one, so take full responsibility for the discussion. And I had to at least give this a try. So for your consideration, councilors, this amendment would have the redistricting committee for informational purposes only consider what a preferred map might look like if we were to have 11 council districts. This is something we've discussed repeatedly in the past. I think I'll admit that this is probably based largely on what happened in the old District 2 and 3 when they were combined east of the river. It created a very complex district that includes downtown, includes Old Town. It's very unique in that sense, and some of the major facilities and so forth. And we did have staff look at other cities and the growth of Albuquerque since 9 districts were created. This would, of course, require changes in the future, but since the committee is only meets once every 10 years, and we do have the expertise of Mr. Sanderhoff on board, that for informational purposes, this would not affect the immediate redistricting this year, but to look at a map, what a map of 11 districts might look like. So that's what it's about. And I appreciate your consideration on the amendment. Looks like I may have a second from Councilor Davis. I hope. So there is a motion and a second. Any discussion, councilors? Councilor Bassan.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, I mean, at first I was thinking this seems wildly outrageous. And then I thought, well, maybe. And I went through this whole process in my head. And now I'm at what's it going to cost us to do this? I mean, because part of me is thinking, well, it's every 10 years. Why not tack it on and just kind of do the research and investigate and see where we end up? But at the same time, how will this change the process and the workload for the committee? Because even I haven't gone through any kind of census with the council or any of the like. So I'm just kind of wondering a little bit more information on what cause and effect might happen.
Yeah, I think we definitely, that's a legitimate question. The sense was it would not be a lot. And again, since they're already looking at maps and already have a very qualified consultant working with them on maps, that it might be informational at least, and interesting to see what it would look like. Councilor Pena.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. President. So you haven't given up on the 11-member council. I just, I appreciate it. I won't be supporting the amendment, but I do appreciate your intent. But I'm going to try to paraphrase what you said earlier about the CPOA, of how hard it is to wrangle when we had 9 members. So, and then I looked at the screen and I seen that we have 9 members. So I think a few more may make it a little more. And I think with the population, the fact that it's been stagnant for so many years and we really haven't seen significant population growth, that I wouldn't support the amendment, but congratulations again on your 11th council member attempt. Thank you, Mr. President.
My perseverance. All right. Thank you, Councilor Lewis.
Mr. President, I'm just thinking how we're going to put 11 people on the Police Oversight Commission if we have to do that. I don't support the amendment. This committee is going to have enough to do anyways, and I don't think we should put this on, but I don't support it.
Councilor, let's see. I guess I'll ask Ms. Morris. Any sense from you of would this be a big change, or is it just a distraction? And I mean, I recognize that there's important work to do, but any sense from your side and staff?
Mr. President, councilors, to be honest, I'm not sure. I don't have a sense of how big or lengthy of a discussion redistricting within Albuquerque will be this time around. It's my understanding that we haven't seen the enormous population growth that we saw between 2000 and 2010. There was some really big changes in the growth of Albuquerque in that decade. And so that led to some really big changes in the maps. And so a lot of discussion. I am under the impression from the consultant that we haven't really seen that anywhere near that level of growth in the city in the last 10 years. So the redistricting, the changes to the boundaries are likely to be smaller. But I don't know that would necessarily translate to more or less discussion. To be honest, this is my first go at redistricting as staff. And so I'm, to be honest, really not sure.
Well, I'm going to withdraw the amendment, but I guess, I think it emphasized the importance of the language. I think it was in the second amendment having to do with preserving communities of interest. I think that was the big argument, that there were some injustices that resulted from the last redistricting in terms of some of the oldest and poorest communities of the city being lumped in with a pretty stable and there are pockets of poverty throughout the city, of course, but a North Valley that's very, very different from those communities of interest who came forward to challenge in court, in fact, that last redistricting. And that's part of the reason I've got this this bone in my mouth that I won't let go of. But I will be withdrawing the amendment. But I think it emphasizes the importance of the discussion about the districts that I think there is an approach to redistricting where you just kind of try to keep it all the same. But I would hope that the committee will be looking broadly at the districts and what's best for communities of interest within each district. Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for withdrawing. I think I would also be interested in seeing what the result would be, but in reality, 10 years from now could be a century from now in the way the city looks. It could either, these are times that we've never seen before. It could shrink by 40%, it could grow by 40% in 10 years. So I think as much as I would be anxious to see what our illustrious and very talented person could do with this, I think I agree with you. We should use the money on something else this time, but it will be very interesting to see where we are. Very, very interesting. So thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thanks. I'll turn it back to the sponsors to close.
Well, I urge your support.
In here, Mr. President.
I want to thank the sponsors for working on this. This is something we have to do, and we stepped up to help make it, put it before us. So thank you for that. So with that closed, we'll move to the vote. Ms. Ortega.
Councillor Bassan.
Yes.
Councillor Davis.
Yes.
Councillor Feeblecorn.
Yes.
Councillor Grout.
Yes.
Councillor Jones.
Yes.
Councillor Lewis.
Yes.
Councillor Pena.
Yes.
Councillor Sanchez. Councillor Benton.
Yes.
9-0 on R226 as amended.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega. We'll move to item G. This is myself and Councillor Bassan, R236. This is referring the petition for the Albuquerque Tourism Marketing District to the planning group to prepare the district plan and authorizing the city clerk to give notice of a hearing for the proposed plan. I'll move a do pass. And looks like a second there from Councillor Bassan. Thank you. And we do have some of our friends from Visit Albuquerque with us here. And I don't know if Councillor Bassan would like to speak to this as well, but this is something that she and I are sponsoring at the request of Visit Albuquerque and the hospitality industry. So let's lead it off. I'll start with the executive director, Ms. Armenta.
Mr. President and members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to briefly address the proposed tourism marketing district before you tonight. I'm going to give you just a general overview and explain the process, because this is really the first step in the process. Again, I'm Tanya Armenta. I'm the president and CEO of Visit Albuquerque. Visit Albuquerque, we're the private not-for-profit 501c6 organization that serves as Albuquerque's accredited destination marketing organization. And I am pleased to have the proposed members of the planning group here with me this evening as well, so they'll be able to answer any of your questions. The individuals put forth for the planning group are key leaders in our community, significant investors, and certainly leaders in our industry. So if it's okay, I would like to go ahead and share my screen and just walk you briefly through a presentation. So again, this evening, we're here to talk about the Albuquerque Tourism Marketing District and as a game changer for our city's economic vitality. So first and foremost, what is a tourism marketing district? The funds provided from a tourism marketing district provide a fully dedicated ongoing source of revenue for tourism promotion. This is a business coalition that allows lodging properties to organize their efforts to increase the city's tourism marketing, which in turn attracts more visitors to Albuquerque. And very importantly, it's a powerful economic development tool that generates revenue and creates jobs. Certainly important topics in our community right now. So how will this work? And again, I want to talk about, this is the first step in the process with the planning group tonight. So this is all proposed. But this is to add a 2% assessment on the gross room rental revenue at lodging properties within the district. The fee is paid by the guest at checkout and collected by the lodging property. So this would be a fee that was passed along to the visitors staying in our hotels, our lodging properties. The lodging properties maintain control of their advertised room rates. So first question might be, why now? Why would we do this now? I think it's no secret that the travel and tourism industry has been disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And as all communities are working to recover, it is a highly competitive environment and only going to get more competitive. So the fact of the matter is that some cities are better prepared to respond than others. And while I talk about the COVID-19 impact and the recovery, important to say that this has been the reality for Albuquerque for quite some time, that we've been really underfunded for a city our size. There's been significant public investment, significant private investment, but really no additional dollars to tell Albuquerque's story and share. and promote the city. So here gives you the Destination Marketing Organization annual budget for some of our key competitors. You'll see there Dallas at over $40 million, Phoenix at over $16.5 million, Tulsa at $10.4 million, and even Santa Fe with $10 million dedicated to their destination marketing efforts. A few things I want to point out. Dallas is not the top of the list. There are many destinations that have 9-figure budgets for their destination marketing efforts. We just picked some competitors here. I also want to point out if there's a 1 carat next to the city's name, it means they've already implemented a tourism marketing district or a tourism improvement district, which we're discussing here. If there's 2 carats next to the city's name, it means they're actively considering it. So I'll give you an example. A Phoenix at $16.5 million, highly likely they're actively considering this. Very, very good possibility, along with Austin, that they're going to jump in terms of their budgeting for promotion, along with cities like Tulsa and Tucson as well. So there we sit at 6.5 million, and that's both our public and private dollars for Visit Albuquerque. And this concept that I'm sharing with you tonight is something that has been growing in popularity. It's over 193 cities across the US have a tourism marketing district, or sometimes called tourism improvement district. And you can see the trend lines here in terms of the growth of their popularity. So you might ask, do we have the capacity to add this 2% assessment? And the answer is yes. Again, here's some of our competitors in terms of the total guest fees upon checkout for some of our competitive set. And so again, you will see where many of those same cities, San Antonio is not at the top. There are some cities that I'm aware of that have 21% upon guest checkout. So we just picked some of our competitors and our comp set. So you'll see where Albuquerque currently sits at 13.875. Reality is we can add this 2% assessment and still stay below the national average for a city our size of 15.9%. So we do have the capacity. That's something that's been actively discussed among our hotel and lodging community. So what impact would this tourism marketing district have? It will effectively double the budget available for marketing our city. So we've done estimates in regards to what that first year collection would be. And when we talk about game-changing possibilities and the ability to tell Albuquerque's story, that's where we arrive at. That is really a doubled budget on behalf of the marketing effort. So making the use case, why would we consider this? Increased marketing sales efforts lead to heightened awareness of the city's diverse culture, rich heritage, and unique events. In turn, more leisure visitors, sporting events, and meetings coming to Albuquerque, stronger demand for lodging and hospitality services, increased employment in the hospitality industry, escalated economic growth and impact on behalf of the industry, and a more vibrant and prosperous community. And I will just point out that, as everyone knows, tourism marketing increases the appeal and the awareness of our city. The benefits are not just to the tourism economy and the tourism industry. It will also benefit our greater economic development efforts as well, with more awareness of Albuquerque, greater appeal for Albuquerque. The Tourism Marketing District Governance Committee would be a governance committee comprised of lodging properties within the district that will provide the oversight, and this committee would include representatives from both full service and limited service lodging properties throughout the city. And again, I mentioned I have members of the planning group is here with me this evening. The proposed planning group is the representatives are Kanan Harris, representing Heritage Hotels and Resorts, Depeche Kawadwala from Sun Capital Hotels, Damon Kompanowski from the Sheraton Uptown, Prakash Sundram from Total Management Systems, and then myself. I will tell you that these individuals are actively engaged in our community, active leaders in our community. Between them, active representation and leadership with the Asian American Hotel Owners Association, the Greater Albuquerque Hotel and Lodging Association, and the Lodgers Tax Advisory Board. So just to quickly talk about how this process works, what we've done leading up to this, to bring it forth to you, we are using the state's Business Improvement District statute as the enabling legislation for this. That statute and that enabling legislation calls for a petition process. Really with the majority of the hotels in the community supporting this. We have met that requirement and submitted that petition to the city. And so we're here before you tonight with the proposed planning group process. The next step after approval of a planning group would be to hold a public hearing. The city clerk would notice all hotels of a public hearing where we would invite all the city clerk would notice all hotels of that public hearing to make sure that we are able, the planning group's able to propose the plan, have discussion, hear from all members of the hotel community, ensuring that everyone's voices, again, we've done the petition process, but ensuring all voices are heard. We then would come back to city council after that process with the proposed ordinance for the tourism marketing district after that process. And then you'll see there's then an additional step to go ahead and adopt the ordinance levying the annual business improvement benefit fees. So at the closure of that, then the district would be complete. There is a possibility with a timeline that this process could move forward and we could look to start collecting as early as July 1st in combination with the city's fiscal year process. And for many of our hotel community, that's exciting news when we talk about, again, the game-changing possibility and recovery opportunities from that. So I really appreciate the opportunity. Our planning group and I now would stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Armenta, and thanks to the planning group for attending tonight. I recommended you come, and hopefully we didn't put you to sleep prior to now, and be happy to hear from any of you. But first, it looks like we do have a question from Councilor Sanchez.
Mr. President, thank you. Ms. Armenta, one of the things that I do a lot within the city of Albuquerque is I am into staycations. I don't mind. I like going to different hotels here. I know a lot of people do. I'm an active member of the Albuquerque Hispano Chamber, and right now they have a staycation program going. So what I was curious about is if there's any way to actually make a change in this so that any citizen that actually has an Albuquerque residence is exempt from paying the actual higher taxes. I've seen that in other cities as well. When I go into the city and if you have a ID with the city, they don't charge you those extra taxes. Just curious.
Ms. Armenta?
Mr. President and Councilor Sanchez, thank you for bringing that forward. We have been working with both local representation as well as a national consultant. I certainly, again, that national consultant working with many of those 193 cities. I will definitely go back to them and inquire as to your point about local residents and the opportunity there for that consideration and bring that back forward through the process.
Any further questions, Councilor Sanchez?
I just wanted to make one more comment, Mr. President, and Ms. Armenta, is I understand this very well, and I've attended many conferences in other states, as all of you have, and I think it's really important that we support this based on the fact that this is new money coming in, and this is money that we won't see otherwise. So I think this is a very, very good program. Thank you.
Thank you. And I also wanted to thank you, Councilor Sanchez, for volunteering to serve on the board of Visit Albuquerque, along with Councilor Grout, both of you. I've served on their board because I'm a believer in this industry. As you say so eloquently, Councilor Sanchez, this is a key component of our economy here. I have a couple other councilors in line. I think it was Councilor Lewis and then Councilor Jones. Need to mute yourself, unmute there, Councilor Lewis.
It's like a 3 strikes, I think, tonight. Mr. President, I might have missed this, but What's the projected revenue that this is, the additional revenue that this would bring in?
Ms. Armenta, ideas on that?
Mr. President, Councilor Lewis, great question. Again, we're in a very uncertain environment, so I wanted to preface it by saying these estimates are pre-COVID estimates, but we believe that the first year collection would estimated at about $4.8 million, so just shy of $5 million in the first year collection. Again, this would be a 5-year service plan, so opportunity for $25 million, upwards of $25 million of total opportunity for marketing for the city.
Yeah, I'm just, Mr. President, I know that there are other revenue sources for marketing our city, and I guess I just want to have we considered some of those other revenue sources when it comes to increasing our marketing, for the city in that way. I mean, I know we've funded, marketing the city in a lot of different ways, but I guess I wanted to just ask that general question of our staff. I mean, what have been some other revenue sources in the past, and including ones that we have right now that don't include an increase into this tax?
Let's see. Who have you been working with on the city staff? Help me, Ms. Armenta.
Mr. President, I believe Sanjay Bhakta is available for questions in regards to that, and does serve as the mayor's representative on our board.
Okay. Is Mr. Bhakta available?
Good afternoon, Council President Benton and Councilor Lewis. I think we have spent some other revenue sources in past. Most recently, during the pandemic, we did allocate some money, close to $1.5 million, but that money was federal money, and it was allowed to be spent specifically during the pandemic for the city tourism and marketing. So we did that. But other than that, I don't believe that we have spent other than lodgers tax revenue for marketing. That said, the administration is supporting this initiative. I think it would create a playing level field for us, especially with our neighboring competing cities. So, and this is a significant amount of money, which would make Albuquerque very competitive. And again, I think it's mostly paid by the people who don't live in Albuquerque. I understand that there are some people who would stay in Albuquerque hotel as mentioned by way of staycation, but mostly it would be spent by people who are not living in this city. So therefore, we support this. I hope that answers your question.
Mr. President, and I'm going to just state this now, that I'm generally not in support of just making it more expensive, to visit our city in this way. And if this was the absolute only way to build the kind of revenue that we need to market our city, then maybe I would consider that. But I'm just not going to consider, just making it more expensive for people to visit our city. And if this doesn't pass, I would absolutely commit that I will do everything I can to make sure that within our budget that we're sufficiently funding and even doubling the marketing fund, for our city. And so I'll absolutely make that commitment, but I just don't support just the principle of raising the fees in that way and just making it more expensive to visit our city. So I hope the sponsors understand that. I want to be right up front and honest about where I am on that.
Thank you. Let's see. We have a couple of counselors, and then let me ask before we go to those counselors. Let me ask Mr. Sundaram to speak, because I know that we do have lodgers tax and so forth, but that is also divided up among other entities outside of Visit Albuquerque and the hotel business. But sir, would you like to speak?
Yeah, sure. Councilor Lewis, I think that was a great point, great question. Probably the same question I asked myself when Tanya Armenta first brought this proposal to us. I represent Total Management Systems. We have 5 hotels here in Albuquerque. They're all limited service properties. Our hotels are all New Mexico owned, and we have probably close to 150 employees at our locations. The way I look at this is it really going to cost somebody more to come to Albuquerque? No, I don't think so, because if you look at the lodgers tax that other cities are charging, we're going to be right in the middle. So I don't think it makes it more expensive. It really kind of just puts us on par from an expense standpoint. The other half of that coin is, over the years, lodgers tax has been, I hate to use the word rated, but it's been utilized for a lot of other things. It's been utilized for the convention center. It's been utilized for what I'll call tourism infrastructure, which leaves very little money left for promoting travel and tourism. In the past history, and if you look at other cities across the state, lodgers tax is the only funding for tourism marketing. So I just see this as something that we've got to do to stay competitive. The other point I want to bring up, and this was voiced by, I'll say, just about every member of the AHOA Hotel Association that I belong to, and several other hotel operators that I spoke to. Our number one concern right now is really public safety. I mean, and we don't want to be seen as taking one nickel, one penny, one dime away from public safety. Our biggest concern is improving public safety. So from that standpoint, I hope you understand where we're coming from as hotel owners. Thank you.
I'll allow Councilor Lewis to do a follow-up, and then we have Councilor Jones and Councilor Bassan.
Mr. President, I understand those arguments. If it was an either or, if we had to, if we were taking away dollars for public safety to be able to fund marketing our city, then good point. But we're not doing that. I don't think that we have to make those choices. We can give you $5 million in this next city budget and completely fund double the size of our marketing for our city. And I think you all would agree that if we would do that and make it less expensive for people to stay a night at your hotel, then I know you would agree with that. And so I think there's a better way, and that's why that's my point that I'm making. I think there's a better way to fund championing our city and helping people to come here and visit the great things about our city and stay in your hotels. And I'd like to fund it a different way, and that's why I'm opposing this specific bill.
Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me make sure I'm understanding what you're proposing here. Ms. Armenta, you're proposing to add basically a tax onto room rates that the hoteliers who participate will be adding an additional fee onto the room rates, and that money will be then used to promote the city and their hotels?
Ms. Armenta.
Ms. Armenta?
President and Councilor Jones, yes. Adding a 2% assessment, important that the terminology for assessment, because this would differ from the other collection of taxes that are government taxes. So this would be an assessment using that business coalition, the business enabling legislation, the business improvement and enabling legislation to address that. Again, the petition process that brought this forward tonight with the meeting that requirement for the majority of hotels that have supported that petition, and the opportunity now for the planning group to hold, if the planning group's approved tonight, the step tonight that's being approved is that planning group, then to hold a public hearing with all hotels in regards to this discussion before coming back to council.
Thank you. And Mr. President, if I may? I don't know how we could see a downside to the people, businesses realizing that they need help. They need to promote, here's the catch, they need to promote our city in order to help their business. And we're considering that that's bad, that they're willing to go forth and raise the money, not from our citizens to promote their business in our city, but from customers, the people who stay in their hotels. So I don't understand what's bad about this. And I commend you all for stepping up and saying, oh my goodness, we're going to do something. We're not going to go to the city council and ask them to increase the lodger's tax and give us 90% of it to do this. We are willing to step up, do the work, make the arrangements, collect the money, and market the city of Albuquerque out of our pockets from that money we've collected. And I think I wish more businesses had the ability to put together something like this. You guys are in a very unique situation, and thank you for being willing to step up and try to do work on your own for the city instead of coming to us with your handout and saying my business isn't as good as it should be. You need to give me more money to make my business better. I see no downside to this. If it doesn't work, you stop charging that much money. I mean, it's not a tax vote. So I thank you all. And this is why you are all such good business people and have all these hotels around the world. But thank you. I am obviously very much in support of this. Thank you.
Councilor Bassan.
Thank you, Mr. President. So kind of on the intro and maybe my close as part of this. And I think that it already got touched on a little bit, but I don't think that there's several points I have. I don't think that raising this cost is what's going to make people's visit to Albuquerque more expensive at this time. I think we have other issues that we need to worry about when it comes to the cost of their visit. At first, I was hesitant to co-sponsor this bill, but then talking about it, and to Councilor Jones's point, once I heard from many constituents and in the hotel industry that were in support of this, it was exactly what Councilor Jones just said about they wanted to do something to fix a void that they had. In addition to then after that, realizing we weren't just asking to hike the percentage in some astronomical way. We're still very competitive in the comparison with other hotels within our spectrum and kind of on the same line of business when it comes to our neighboring cities that are trying to achieve the same goal. And they're, in my opinion, doing it better. So now here's a way to step up and make it happen. So I don't think that we're going to be having too much of an increase as far as the consumer cost. I do think that the businesses want it. I think that I really like the idea that Councilor Sanchez put on here about maybe a local discount. Maybe hotels already offer it. I, with my many children, don't really do staycations very often, but at the same time, I think that's something worth looking into as well. But I think that this is a really good compromise to try to market Albuquerque as the amazing place that it is without taking money from our residents and taxpayers in Albuquerque. So I'm really hoping to urge your support on that.
All right. I think we're in close here, but I'll allow Councilor Lewis to respond again, I guess.
Thanks, Mr. President. Look, I think this is going to pass. I just think there's a better way to fund it. And the fact is the group is coming to the city for approval on a fee increase. And I think there's a better way to fund it. I mean, that's just the bottom line. And I think a lot of money that we're spending on a lot of other things in the city of Albuquerque. And if the city did its job and actually funded promoting our city and tourism in our city, then you wouldn't have to be raising your fees to be able to do that. So hope you understand my position on it. I think there's a better way. I'll leave it with that. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thanks. So I guess I don't know if the administration wants to comment at all on this or has a position on it. Mr. Rowell.
Mr. President and members of the council, as Mr. Bakta said, obviously this is an opportunity for our businessmen and women that own hotels are stepping up and saying, look, we care enough about our business and about this community to impose this fee. And this is the first step, right? There's still more steps to be had before this is done. They've got to do a meeting with other hotels to get their perspective on this and then come back to the council. So this really begins the process. And I suspect that as we move through it, that we'll get more and more conversations with the community. But it really is an opportunity, I think, to really move the city forward and really put some money into marketing that we all know, even with the pandemic as it is, this is an opportunity for us to get a head start and be ahead of the curve rather than behind the curve, as we often find ourselves in many of our areas in our communities. So we're supportive of the process and look forward to working with Tanya and the hotel industry as a whole.
Thank you, Mr. Ryle. I'll go ahead and close as well. I have, as I referred to before, I've sat on this board for many years, and I'm happy to have a couple other counselors who want to jump in. I'll stay on as an alternate to the board, but I have been through some of the wars with some of our friends who faces we see here tonight, and you know, there is a lot of competition for the lodger's tax money. You know, that would be one aspect. I think, you know, what Visit Albuquerque and the folks that do the national advertising for us find is that they're in competition with a lot of other interests, including, you know, let's just face it, political interests, where perhaps you know, some group of public officials want to get a capital project done, and you know, yes, it's legitimate use of the lodger's tax, but that takes a big bite out. And I think when we look at the support the cities are giving to their tourism industry, we're lagging, and I do appreciate the private sector stepping up and wanting to help us, help them, but also at the same time help the city as a whole by promoting Albuquerque as the wonderful place that it is. So this is a first step. It's not the final. There'll be a chance to question more as we go forward, but for this first step of forming the advisory group and moving it forward, I urge your support. So with that, we'll move to a vote. Ms. Ortega.
Councillor Basson.
Yes.
Councillor Davis.
Yes.
Councillor Fiedelkorn.
Yes.
Councillor Grout.
Yes.
Councillor Jones.
Yes.
Councillor Lewis.
No.
Councillor Pena.
Yes.
Councillor Sanchez.
Yes.
Councillor Benton.
Yes.
Passes on an 8-1 vote.
Thank you. We're near the end here. Hopefully won't have to take a break. We have 2 items remaining. The first is R4. This is adopting the multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan for the city and Bernalillo County. I move a do pass. Second from Councilor Davis. Thank you. And I will ask the administration to address this. I was actually doing this by request, and so I don't know all that much about it, but I know it's important work with the county. The administration can speak to this.
Council President Benton and members of the council, this is Roger Ebner, the Director of the Emergency Management Office. I want to thank you for considering adopting this plan that I guess represents the collaborative efforts of 7 local jurisdictions or entities and several thousand hours of work to complete. The 585-page plan examines our local threats and hazards, whether they be natural, technological, or human caused. We rank them and establishes actions to address those threats and hazards, and hopefully will make us all safer. The plan is required by FEMA to be updated every 5 years and allows us to participate in various FEMA programs, including grants. And our office has one $500,000 grant that's in progress right now that does require the adoption of this particular plan. So with that, I want to thank you for your consideration, and I'll entertain questions.
Councilors, are there any questions? I did not move this yet, so I'll move a do pass on this. Is there a second? A second from Councilor Davis. Thank you. Questions for? Yes, Councilor Davis.
Hey, Mr. President, we're coming to a close. I just want to say welcome back to Roger. It's good to see you, Director. I think a lot of folks on the council and the public probably don't think about emergency management much until the last couple of years, but I want to say in those first few days of the pandemic, you were absolutely critical in helping us feel comfortable and helping this council make some really critical decisions And that support and insight and confidence has not wavered from the very beginning. We've all watched other cities that have really struggled to do this because they weren't as prepared. And I just want to give you some congratulations and public acknowledgement for that work, and say that this grant is well deserved in part because of the great work that y'all put in for the preparedness side. And so thank you for this, and this will be a great effort to continue that work, and it's well deserved. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And I'll ditto that, Mr. Ebner. Thanks for your service to the city.
Thank you, sir.
All right, I don't see any other questions from counselors, so we'll move to a vote. Ms. Ortega.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Peepercorn,
Yes.
Counselor Grout,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you. Now we move to other business. This is EC1, the mayor's veto of O2179, amending the Open Space Trust Fund and Land Administration Ordinance to authorize the use of the fund for open space acquisitions, amending a relevant cross-reference to the Open Space Advisory Board Ordinance, and amending Section 2.12.1 of the Capital Improvements Program intent and scope to make permanent the 2% CIP set aside for open space acquisitions. And the administration, the mayor did veto this and sent a veto message. I assume everyone has read that, but if a counselor wishes to attempt to override the mayor's veto, they will make a motion to override. If no motion is made, or if a second is not received, the mayor's veto stands. Also, if a motion is made, second is received, but 6 votes are not obtained in favor of the override motion, the mayor's veto stands. Is there a motion to override? All right, seeing none, then the mayor's veto stands. Let's see, I'm sorry, Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think this is probably confusing for some of the people at home who don't know what we just did. And I think simplistically, we just need to say what we did was refused to enforce. We overrode. We agreed with the mayor and decided that the handling of open space and the fund, that the trust fund for the open space, shall not be changed by this legislation.
That's correct. So our action was to not override the veto. However, what that does effectively is leave the system as it exists now in place. I think one factor, and I see Councilor Lewis wants to speak as well, but I'll just quickly from my perspective, you can read the mayor's veto message. I think the one thing that was not mentioned in the veto message was the role of the Open Space Advisory Board, which we have a very good, very active board. They recognize that board. I don't want to speak for them, but I think from the ones I've spoken to, they recognize that some of the issues that Councilor Harris, his reasoning for bringing forth this legislation are legitimate issues. It was just that this was not the path forward to address them. So, but
Mr. President, I'm sorry.
Yeah, please.
If I may expound on that, that's what we needed to get out there, that this is now an opportunity for us and the advisory group, which is magnificent. They live and breathe this group, is to reassess and see what can be done to make the open space system work better for the citizens of Albuquerque. Is that fair to say, Mr. President?
I think that's right. And I think the message also mentioned the need for equity of access to open space is a really important point. Certainly the return on the permanent fund our return on investment is something that needs to be improved. There are a lot of issues remaining to be tackled, and I think there's an interest in really updating the ordinance, but just not in the way it was done.
Thank
So,
you.
Councilor Lewis, I'm sorry.
Thank you, President, and thank you for letting me have the opportunity to explain to people who
Yeah.
might not have seen what happened or understood what happened. Thank you.
Councilor Lewis and then Councilor Pena.
Mr. President, I think to further clarify that, I think the statement was made that by letting it stand like it does right now, that we agree with the mayor on this, and that's clearly not the case. I don't believe. I mean, there was a vote taken on this, and there was a veto on it. I think that there's still councilors that absolutely agree with this bill, and I, for one, and just because I think the public may not understand, what's happened here. If I could still make that motion, I'll make a motion to override.
You can still make that motion. Is there a second? Councilor Pena, did you want a second or do you want to speak?
I was actually just going to speak.
Okay. Is there a second to Councilor Lewis's motion? Councilor Bassan, were you seconding it?
Mr. President, I'll second it for the sake of the opportunity to be able to vote on it. But at the same time, I also do have a comment when you will allow.
Okay. So that motion is on the floor, but Councilor Pena was in the queue, so I'll ask her to speak first, and then we can get to the motion. And you can speak to the motion, of course, also, Councilor Pena.
Thank you, Mr. President. So it's kind of loud around here. My grandkids are all in the other room, so I apologize for that. But I just really wanted to say, I guess since we were having some discussion on it, I just really wanted to commend Councilor Harris. I really appreciate his effort on this and all his work. He is actually, if you, the trust fund is actually not a trust fund in the name of a trust fund. It's just by namesake. And so the money that the interest has been generated since the trust fund name was developed hasn't really generated, I think, about I don't remember what the amount was, $870,000, which really hasn't allowed us to purchase property. And by us being able to use the 10 million to use property, to buy property that we're losing, especially here, while throughout the city, and the property values aren't going to be any cheaper down the road, the property values are going to actually increase. So I really appreciate his efforts in that. And the fact that he is actually the one that was the brainchild behind putting the percentage before us that through our capital that we generate every year. And that's actually the money that we've been able to acquire property with. So I think he's been really thoughtful, and in terms of how he envisioned this moving forward and to increase it to 2%, I think that would have actually also enabled us to purchase property more quickly into the future. So that being said, I wasn't planning on voting against the mayor's veto. I just think it's an opportunity to really have that discussion as we move forward, because I do believe that the Open Space Task Force, that they actually, the opportunity to have more extensive dialogue with them and how do we improve that fund is paramount to us acquiring open space moving forward. And in addition to that, just wanting to say that, when we're talking about open space and the purchase of open space, something that I really had a lot of concern about was the equity, because right now there's definitions within us purchasing that says we must purchase pristine property. And I think we definitely need to have that equity tool in there, because I had a piece of property, which was the Crestview Bluff, that was not pristine property, and it was being kind of overlooked as a potential for open space. So those are some of the things that I hope that we have with the board moving forward, so that we can look at how we make it more equitable and more financially stable and able to buy property moving forward for the city of Albuquerque. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilor Bassan.
Mr. President, thank you. So I still stand by my earlier vote from last year. I think we should spend this money. I think we should buy open space, and I think we should secure it before it gets developed, because that's the whole reason why we want to have open space preserved. But at the same time, I do think that the points the mayor made in his veto message make sense. I think that there is some room to be able to do things with a little bit of a different process while encompassing the different individuals in the advisory board that we have with respect to what they do and what we have them do. So I still hope that we spend the money, and I still hope we circle back to this. And I want to do that. But at the same time, I also want to make sure that we do things right with conjunction to the system that we have set up.
Councilor Lewis.
And Mr. President, I think we can still consider the, some of the points that the mayor made in that veto. Absolutely, we can still continue to have that discussion. I do want to see. I think that the council made a great case for this, and the majority passed it last year. And I certainly want to be able to champion the many opportunities that we have for acquiring more open space on the west side. I think we have some treasured areas on the west side that we need to move on, and without these funds being available, I think in this kind of way, I don't think that they're going to. I mean, this fund has the kind of use that I think we really want it to have. And so, but again, I don't want to make that case again, because I think the case was made, and I certainly don't want the fact that we may not, even that if we didn't make a motion to override this veto, that somehow we changed our minds from what happened before. And so I think this is a good process, and so I think we should take this vote.
All right, so we do have a motion and a second for override of the veto. Councilor Davis.
I'll take that as the president's hint that we ought to bring this to a close. I agree with the other councilors. I think there's a lot of agreement here that there's an opportunity to do this, but that the mayor's veto had some merit in some of the ways that the final bill came out. But let me remind the council and place a flag here. Like, the Open Space Trust Fund is unique in this country because of what it does and how we provide for it. And we have huge amounts of federal dollars coming to this city. And lots of new federal dollars in terms of conservation, the federal public lands trust fund, the state's conservation efforts that the now with capital outlay at the legislature hitting record numbers. And I know a number of us are already asking for capital outlay for open space acquisitions. I want to plant the flag here that I think we can do both. We should preserve this trust fund, and that's what we heard from the community. Was that this is a valuable tool and asset for our community. But we have our federal priorities we just deferred for another meeting. We have the legislature that's just getting started and barely getting started. We have opportunities to do both. And I think things like the Crestview Bluffs, the North Geologic Window, some of the Tejeros Arroyo conservation areas, all of those are worthy of acquisition. And there are other ways to do that with large chunks of cash coming to the city and available to us. And so I want us to think about not just rating this fund because I don't think we're going to override the mayor's veto. I won't support doing so. But somebody's going to bring a bill similar to the old one back. And I want us to stop and think that going into the budget, we might have some other alternatives that I think would be smarter and get us to where those folks want to get to sooner. Thank you, Mr. President.
I'll see if any other councils want to weigh in. That's fine. Otherwise, we'll go to the vote. I did want to just say, because I was involved in this, I did vote against the original bill. There was a really key missing step here, and that step was going to the Open Space Advisory Board and was having actual council committee hearings on this, because it is a lot of money and it is a big asset of the city, that the open space lands. And we know that we need others, both some of these major, large purchases that we've seen in the past, but also smaller proposals like Crestview Bluffs, which is, could have some very important historical aspects that haven't been considered yet. But I think that was one part of the veto message, and I don't necessarily agree with everything in that veto message, but I think the veto was correct. But I think it's really important that we listen to our board that puts in a lot of work. And just most recently, on another open space project that we worked on with the administration to manage the Candelaria Nature Preserve. But we've got to listen to folks who are really meet monthly and listen to expert testimony. And I'm confident that if we take it back and keep it in the forefront the way we're talking about, that we can improve the system. It is a long-standing system. That's a great thing. But it's also, when something's been around that long, we really need to take a good hard look at it and see whether it's serving the best interest, especially with regard to the investment question. So, all right. So I think I don't see anybody else that wants to weigh in. We'll go to a vote. Ms. Ortega. This would be a motion. This is a motion to override the veto.
Correct, and it would require 6 votes. Councilor Bassan.
No.
Councilor Davis.
No.
Councilor Feeblecorn.
No.
Councilor Grout.
No.
Councilor Jones.
No.
Councilor Lewis.
Yes.
Councilor Pena.
No.
Councilor Sanchez.
No.
Councilor Benton.
No.
Motion fails on a 1-8 vote.
All right. Thanks, councilors. We're on our last item. This is the approval of committee appointments. I move approval of the committee appointments dated January 18th, 2021, which are in your iPads. And I see a second from Councilor Bassan. Any comments? I just as president, this was hard. We had a lot of competition for some of the committees, and I tried to balance it out as best I could. And appreciate everybody's interest and especially the I shouldn't start calling you new counselors. I won't say that. What are we calling our welcome new colleagues and returning colleague, Councilor Lewis. Appreciate your willingness to serve on these, and I think, as we know, all these committees, if we pay attention, we all have a voice in them. But it's important to have the folks who put in a little bit more time on, depending on what the task of each committee is. So thank you for your willingness to serve. So there's a motion and a second for the committee appointments. Ms. Ortega.
Yes, Mr. President, and just to quickly clarify, it's dated January 18th, 2022. The year oversight is my fault. Apologies for that. Councilor Bassan.
Yes.
Councilor Davis.
Yes.
Councilor Feeblecorn.
Yes.
Councilor Grout.
Yes.
Councilor Jones.
Yes.
Councilor Lewis.
Yes.
Councilor Pena.
Yes.
Councilor Sanchez.
Yes.
Councilor Benton.
Yes.
9-0.
All right. Thanks, everyone. And there being no other business, the city council meeting is adjourned.